The events of our story begin on a beautiful day, where we see a beautiful girl heading to meet her boyfriend. She waves to him from a distance and apologizes for being late, explaining that she left him waiting for a long time. She then tells him that the reason for her delay was the heavy traffic on the way. However, her boyfriend seems annoyed by her tardiness, telling her that he had been waiting there for a very long time, to which she angrily responds that she has already apologized, but he does not remain silent, hinting that she might have overslept as usual, adding that he had told her before to stop eating snacks late at night, indicating that those snacks were making her gain weight. The girl becomes upset with his words and says, "Is this how you talk to your girlfriend?" before slapping him on the face. He then asks her if she really loves him. Why would she hit him? Then after that, they start laughing together, and they both seem very happy. Then we see them holding hands as they walk after making up. Later, they sit in a quiet place as it is Saturday, and the girl tells him that her house will be empty and quiet in the afternoon. She whispers in his ear, telling him about what they plan to do. But at that moment, her boyfriend sees something that causes fear and terror to appear on his face. Afterward, the girl notices the thing that scared him, and fear appears on her face too, and we see blood on her face, and she remains frozen in place from the shock. Then her boyfriend calls her name and tries to wake her up because she needs to move immediately. But she cries and asks him why there are monsters here. She tells him, while crying, that the place they meet was supposed to be a safe zone. When she looks up, a bigger shock shows on her face when she sees what is in the sky, because the sky is full of monsters and flying dragons of massive sizes, along with even larger and more colossal ones. A major catastrophe strikes the city due to the monsters that burn and destroy everything, especially since it happened without any warnings. We see those monsters everywhere, and people are fleeing for their lives from all directions. Destruction, devastation, and fires are widespread this time. The transformation into monsters was completely different from any previous time, and we see a strange person standing by observing what is happening. He says that because of this science, civilization and knowledge have become worthless because all the heroes who used to protect people during these catastrophes have all died. This person adds that they must destroy them because humanity is now on the verge of extinction. But then we see a strong person appear, fighting the monsters while smiling, and we hear the voice of the leader narrating what is happening, saying, "There is still a long time before humanity goes extinct." Then the leader calls out to a group of heroes known as Team Route 9, consisting of 9 heroes, Elixir, Waxen and Zira, and Dele and Nicholas, and Nikadi and Marina, and Xinhua. Xinhua says with his eyes closed and focused. The leader says that this cannot be the end of the world. Team Route 9 is asked if they are ready. At this point, Xinhua actually opens his eyes and the heroes are ready. Each of them uses their special abilities to eliminate the monsters surrounding them. After an intense and fierce battle between Team Route 9 and these monsters, the dawn of a new day rises, and the team of heroes has defeated all the monsters, and they were indeed able to save the world from this danger and from extinction. We then see Xinhua sitting with his drink in hand, telling his friends from Team Route 9 that they can now celebrate, and indeed, all the friends celebrate together for saving the world, spending a beautiful day together until night falls, and they all sleep with the reassurance that the danger has ended. Xinhua is among them, thinking that the fighting and difficult days are over and there will be no more death or destruction, and that the heroes have gained fame and wealth as a result of all their heroic deeds. Xinhua closes his eyes happily, feeling that all that suffering is now in the past, and the heroes can now retire in peace. Xinhua sleeps in happiness and calm, remaining asleep while feeling relaxed. But after a while, he starts hearing noises increasing around him. Finally, he is forced to open his eyes because the noise has become even more bothersome, and he asks what that annoying noise is. He finds 2 workers in front of him, one of whom is speaking to him angrily, asking who he was talking to, telling him that he can talk in his sleep at his house, not at work. He continues, saying that he must get up and return to work now, and that lunchtime is also over. Xinhua replies that it is inappropriate to speak to him in that way because he is older than him. After that, he asks where he is now anyway, but the worker does not answer his question. Instead, he pulls him by the hand and tells him to move and follow, because their boss at work will be angry with them. But Xinhua asks him to wait a little, asking what is happening in this place, where the other members of Team Route 9 are and where Nicholas is. The worker, confused, asks what he is talking about and what has happened to him today. saying that he might need a slap on his face to wake him up from whatever he is in. Then Xinhua gets up at the sound of someone calling his name, and we are surprised to see that Xinhua has become a young beau, much younger than he was before he and the Team Route 9 heroes slept. At that time, we see workers around him cutting up a very large creature. We see their boss talking to someone named Kim, telling him to move the items in front of him and transport parts of the monster. From here, Xinhua stands there, shocked, unable to believe his eyes, looking in amazement at the people carrying parts of the monster's body being cut up in front of him. One of the workers shouts at Xinhua, telling him to move and work with the workers, or refuse to receive his wages. At that moment, Xinhua sees everything happening around him and starts comprehending the situation, saying that this scene is disgustingly familiar to him. Our hero introduces himself, saying he is Xinhua, 56 years old, a veteran of high rank, the hero who saved the world from the great catastrophe, earned the title of the great hero and was about to start his life as a millionaire. He was also about to retire and rest after a very successful life. He then looks around again, saying that he thought so. At that moment, a substance from the monster being caught by the workers falls on his head. He tells one of the workers working on the monster's mouth to be a bit careful and cautious, because the substance might contain some kind of toxins. Xinhua becomes very angry at his situation, saying that he was supposed to be celebrating now drinking a bottle of champagne worth more than 100 million won, and he does not understand why this is happening to him. At that moment, someone calls his name and hits him on the head, increasing Xinhua's irritation. He asks who is hitting him this time, and when he turns he is surprised to see the person who hit him. We learn that it is their boss at work named Kim, and Xinhua says that Kim was a rude laborer who died about 25 years ago. However, Kim gives him a hard slap on the face and asks who he says is dead. The quarrel continues between them, and Kim asks him how he dares to speak about him in that way, threatening him that he will be the one to die. Now at his hands due to the beating, Xinhua tries to escape from Kim, but he does not understand how this is happening. Kim kicks him hard on the back. As a result, Xinhua's phone falls during the fight. Xinhua goes to pick it up, feeling sad, and Kim tells him that this is what happens to someone like him when he disrespects his boss, asking if the phone is still intact and if he wishes to die, repeating those words. But at that moment, Xinhua is surprised to notice that his phone is a very old model. He then asks Kim if he knows exactly which year they are in. Kim is surprised by Xinhua's condition in front of him. He sympathizes with him, saying that he feels sorry for him, and tells him that they are in the year 2020, asking what exactly happened to him. But Xinhua is lost in his thoughts, thinking that this time is 32 years for the time he was in, and he begins to understand that he has returned to the past. This means that his status window has also returned, and that he is now rank F. His abilities are still weak, and he works as a laborer here, unable to believe this is the reality. Finally, the workday ends, and Kim tells the workers to clean the place, because they will be leaving. Xinhua leaves the worksite with the workers upset about what is happening to him. He thinks that he thought he was used to this kind of work before, but it seems that labor-intensive work is now different and exhausting for him, and he feels the urge to cry from fatigue. At that moment, Kim calls out to him, asking if he received his payment before leaving, to which Xinhua replies that he did and thanks him. Kim tells him that their work the next day will be at Syndrome Station at exit number 2, and asks him not to be late. But when Xinhua hears the name of the worksite for the next date, he remembers and says that Syndrome Station was completely destroyed a few years ago by the flying dragon called Aegistronon. Kim replies, saying that what he is saying is madness and that the place is a white zone, meaning it is safe and secure. Xinhua immediately responds that he did not mean anything, and Kim tells him that he has become very stupid. Xinhua walks thinking that the year 2030 was the year when the destruction of Syndrome Station happened, and he is now at the subway station remembering that this happened when the monster, the enraged Magus, destroyed the barrier between dimensions and attacked the city, which means that this will happen 10 years from now. Xinhua arrives at the subway station, thinking that his memories are very jumbled, and remembers that he is now in the year 2020 anyway. The subway arrives and Xinhua boards it, saying that there is still something strange, because he was not supposed to return to this time. Since he is not the one who is a time traveler, we learn that Nicholas Huygen, who was the leader of Team Route 9 and was a very mysterious man, was the one who said he was a time traveler, and he was the one who predicted the great catastrophe. Nicholas traveled around the world to establish the Route 9 Company, and he was the one who gathered the 9 heroes who managed to prevent the catastrophe. Xinhua thinks emotionally affected that Nicholas was also his greatest friend in his previous life. At that moment, Xinhua hears the recorded voice on the subway announcing that the train he is on will soon pass near the yellow zone and will later reach a station called Besamgam on line number 1, and that this station is a red zone. Xinhua remains lost in thought, and notes saying that it was Nicholas who was supposed to return, not him. The subway then arrives at the station, and the voice on the subway announces that since security officials have not found any trace of the criminal Black Cross group for some time, passengers can disembark at the station with peace of mind. At that moment, Xinhua thought that he had never imagined he would want to return to the past. He gets off the metro, and we learn that this area is the red zone, which means it is a dangerous area. We see the place looking very bleak and full of garbage, with many people sitting on the ground and on the stairs. There are also people attacking each other and stealing from each other, and Xinhua says that this place always makes him feel bad and that he never got used to it, no matter how many times he came here. At this moment, his thoughts are interrupted by the sound of someone yelling at an old man telling him to get out of the way. We see that the old man is frail, and the person yelling at him tells him to go beg somewhere else and stop sitting in their way. Xinhua sympathizes with him and goes to check on the old man, asking if he is okay. And the old man asks Xinhua to help him stand up. Indeed, Xinhua helps him up and walks with him. And the old man thanks him and asks if Xinhua is from the Ray Zone because his face seems familiar. Xinhua replies that there is no need to thank him, and that he is indeed a local. At this point, the old man tells him that since Xinhua lives in the Ray Zone, he should understand very well that he should not help those he does not know because it is dangerous, and that he should not be kind to strangers, and we are surprised as the old man pulls out a weapon resembling a long needle and points it at Xinhua. Xinhua is also shocked by the old man's actions. We then cut to another scene where we find Xinhua bound and chained, with someone calling out to him to wake up after the old man drugged him. Xinhua wakes up and understands that what the old man injected him with was a toxin causing paralysis. Xinhua thinks that defensive skills, like poison immunity or magic detection, were things he knew nothing about at this time, and that he has now made a beginner's mistake. He then looks at the person who tied him up and asks who he is. In front of him, we see a large man with what looks like his gang. And the man replies, asking Xinhua why he is pretending not to know him, telling him that he is Park Dune. He continues, saying that he knew how to avoid meeting him well in the past few days. Xinhua remembers this person, and says that Park was the biggest obstacle he faced in his 20s. We learn that Park is rank D and works as a thug in this neighborhood. Park then tells Xinhua that the money he borrowed from him has doubled over the past 3 days due to interest, and that the amount is now about 10 times more, asking him what he will do now. But Xinhua replies, saying that this is nonsense, and that Park knows that this is not true. Park tells his men that Xinhua, the scoundrel, is speaking rudely. He grabs Xinhua by the hair and tells him that it is well known that rank B strength is twice that of rank F, threatening him that if he hits him the wrong way, Xinhua might actually die. He continues saying that since Xinhua spoke rudely to him, he will punish him for his words with a light blow, and he hits him very hard in the stomach. Xinhua feels extreme pain from it, unable even to lift his head afterward. Park asks him if he could actually have died from a hit like that. One of Park's men says that Xinhua was always this weak and that he might indeed be dead now. At this moment, Xinhua thinks that when he was in his 20s, he worked all the time as a rank F laborer without knowing his true potential, and the thugs in the neighborhood treated him like a punching bag. He hears Park describing him as a scoundrel and boring and telling his men to get rid of his body quickly and then go to steal whatever is in his house. At this moment, Xinhua tells himself that now he knows what his true talent is, which is that he can draw mana from his body through mental concentration, and Xinhua begins to try to focus. At that moment, a strange light begins to emerge from Xinhua's body, and one of the men with Park sees it, telling Park that it seems Xinhua is still alive and that this light is mana control. Park laughs when he learns that Xinhua is still alive and trying to free himself, mockingly telling him that a rank F person is trying to gather his insignificant mana as if he were a real hero, asking if he is trying to escape, then laughing harder and telling him they are not in a superhero storybook. But then surprise and fear appear on his face. When a very strong mana light emerges from Xinhua's body, he is indeed able to break the chains that had bound him. With this, Xinhua is now able to use his power, but Park and the others do not believe what they are seeing in front of them. Xinhua stands up, thinking that his body is still young and that he has a long time ahead of him, and he realizes that this may not be bad luck. After all, it could be a second chance for him. He looks at Park and his men, asking them why they do not try to do something useful instead of what they are doing now. But Park becomes angry, asking if Xinhua thinks he can do anything to them, then telling him that he knows very well that no one of rank F can do anything that can defeat a rank D's defense. At this moment, Xinhua focuses even more to increase his mana concentration and enhance its power, also starting to raise the mana's temperature slowly until it reaches the critical point. He tells Park that he only knows these 2 words and knows nothing else. At this moment, the mana concentration reaches a very high level, and its temperature also becomes very high, allowing Xinhua to easily penetrate the rank D's defense, despite still being rank F. The mana explosion occurs, and the first ability that manifests from Xinhua's powers is the Exploding Fist skill. Xinhua strikes Park with the Exploding Fist, delivering a very powerful blow. It throws Park to the far end of the place they were in, slamming him into the wall. Park is in bad shape, telling Xinhua that this is impossible because there is a big difference between rank F and rank D, and he looks at Xinhua, asking him who he really is. Xinhua replies, saying that he only borrowed some experience from the future, nothing more. Then he tells Park that this is the time he will pay for all his crimes. Park screams in utter fear and panic of Xinhua. Xinhua notices that Park has dropped his wallet. The wallet is full of money, clearly collected by Park from the people he bullied like Xinhua. Xinhua walks while eating his food. He thinks about what happened, realizing that this is actually a very good opportunity when reconsidering the matter, because in his previous life, he had been preparing for the great catastrophe, not for noble reasons like saving humanity, but to settle matters with Nicholas, who controlled all the strings so that he could live in peace. And after continuing this for 30 full years, he ended up with people around him treating him as if he were stagnant water. But this time, Xinhua decides that he will not get involved in big matters like the great catastrophe, as someone as talented as Nicholas will surely be able to handle it on his own. And all Xinhua will do now is use his knowledge of the future to make lots of money. He will buy the resort of his dreams and build a castle there, but without dungeons or anything else. He will not have to wait 32 years. He will retire in his 20s. Xinhua continues thinking as he walks, realizing that the first thing he must do is raise his rank, because the higher his rank, the more money he will make from clearing high-level dungeons. When Xinhua thinks about the hierarchical ranking of awakened hunters, he realizes that there really is no fairness in this ranking. While some hunters awaken as first-rank hunters and are registered as such, there are hunters like Xinhua who are classified as rank F and become the lowest ranked. Xinhua remembers that in his previous life he was a rank F hunter and worked as a porter because he had no talent and knew nothing. But thanks to Nicholas's help, he was able to discover his talent. After 6 years of awakening his ability, he managed to join the powerful team called Route 9. After experiencing many moments when he was closer to death than life for an entire decade, the rank he finally achieved was rank X. Now he can say with pride that he is the only hunter who climbed the hunter hierarchy from the bottom to the top, and he was recognized as an X-rank hunter. Now is the time to awaken his true talent. Xinhua begins to recall what happened to him in his previous life, when he sneaked into a dungeon to earn some extra money, but he soon discovered that it was a bad idea, and wanted to find a way out before any monsters appeared. Suddenly, Xinhua fell to the ground. Due to the sudden attack by the monsters, these monsters were seeking to eliminate him. Xinhua remained in shock and awe, thinking if this was the way he would die after spending his entire life as a rank F hunter, striving to develop himself. But suddenly, the monsters were attacked and someone was able to defeat them. Xinhua was surprised, unable to understand who this person was and how they got there. This person was Nicholas. Though Xinhua did not know him yet, Nicholas tells Xinhua that he is very weak, on the verge of being killed by rank M monsters without even realizing his true talent. He offers to take him with him if he truly wants to know why he is so lucky, and that he can develop himself and reach rank triple S or even higher. Xinhua hears this and is shocked, asking Nicholas how he knows him and who he is at all. Nicholas replies, introducing himself as Nicholas Huygen, an X-rank hunter awakened from the future, and saying that he wants Kang Xinhua to be his companion and friend. Xinhua is even more surprised, feeling that what Nicholas says is unbelievable. How could he be a hunter from the future and know him, and where is he taking him? Now, Xinhua tries to resist telling Nicholas that the path from there is blocked in the end, but Nicholas does not need to complete the path. He simply jumps and flies into the sky, pulling Xinhua along with him. On their way, Nicholas tells Xinhua that his true talent is unlike any other talent related to wielding weapons or casting spells. It is a very different and unique ability. Xinhua asks how his talent could be special. Nicholas replies, telling him that it is the talent of transformation or modification, as he likes to call it. Xinhua listens to Nicholas's words with amazement and awe. Nicholas continues telling Xinhua that his energy circle is unique, and if he can control and shape it, he will be able to transform any part of his body and enhance his attributes and as he wishes. Nicholas's tone changes as he tells Xinhua that while he may just be a human, his body can easily surpass the abilities of any other human. Xinhua returns to the rooftop of the building. He decides that he will begin to implement a skill related to physical modification. And the first thing he will modify is his heart and lungs. As modified organs become excellent mana reservoirs, Xinhua begins controlling the flow of mana within his body, following what Nicholas told him about how the modification talent enhances different abilities for various body parts. Little by little, Xinhua actually feels the essence of mana within him. He feels grateful to Nicholas once again, because reconstructing the mana circuits and flow within his body will greatly improve and enhance the strength of his heart and lungs. Indeed, Xinhua begins to feel the difference immediately. Additionally, at the X-Hunter rank, the flow and circulation of mana throughout the entire body becomes as natural as breathing. It is accompanied by excruciating pain all over the body, as if his soul is being ripped from him. But Xinhua had gone through all this pain in battles over the course of 30 years. He had adapted to it no matter how intense it was. Xinhua finally feels the fruits of his pain and the results of the transformation skill. His eyes shine with confidence and narcissism for having achieved the same result as in his previous life, but much earlier. With this, the modification skill is successfully completed. Xinhua smiles confidently and begins to think about what he will do next. Typically, an awakened hunter needs 12 hours, including sleep, to restore his mana, but the enhanced organs improve this process and make it almost 5 times faster. By using the skill and increasing mana in the right arm, the time for attack or defense will change depending on the user's will. Meanwhile, the left arm will focus and release air energy. Xinhua feels the energy flowing in his veins overflowing into all his organs, and the capacity of mana itself has increased nearly 5 times compared to before. Even the time it took him to reach this point was only 10 minutes. He achieved an accomplishment that should have taken at least 10 years of normal, steady growth. He feels like he wants to modify his entire body immediately, but this may not be necessary now and would be risky if he were not careful. He does not want to rush, as he still has a lot of time. Xinhua uses his modified arm, feeling immense excitement when he notices the difference in strength. He continues thinking about the next modification and which organ he should work on. He finds himself slowly leaning toward the ground, until he falls and cannot get back up, since a hunter who has just left rank F cannot naturally withstand the mana flow. The amount of mana flowing in his body could indeed cause him to collapse. After a period of unconsciousness, Xinhua wakes up in a panic, beginning to check his wallet and all his body parts. He is terrified, but realizes, thankfully, that he is not in the raid zone full of theft and crime. But thanks to the coma he was in, his mana has returned, and now he can start the second modification process. Xinhua sits and decides to try 3 new modifications. He focuses mana flow on his eyes, because a modified eyeball can detect hidden mana flows. It also acts as a barrier that prevents illusions and hallucinations. He then moves on to the next modification, which is in his mouth. He changes the composition of the saliva in his mouth using the transformation ability. Then he proceeds to the third and final modification, which is also in his mouth. He changes the shape, hardness and sharpness of his teeth entirely. Xinhua wants to test his new modifications. He grabs an iron pipe next to him. He starts biting it with teeth that are now like crocodile fangs. which can easily pierce through the iron pipe as if it were marshmallow candy. Xinhua feels happiness and begins to think about the next step he should take in this life. Later in the morning, Xinhua's alarm rings. He wakes up surprised, as in his old life, he never felt this refreshed in the run-down apartment that was in the raid zone. Even his hands and feet, which always used to ache, do not hurt at all, and they are in good condition. Now, for some reason, he does not feel tired at all. Xinhua enters to take a shower, and all that occupies his mind is that today is a very important day, because at a time when dungeon raids with the college represented a good source of income for porters to earn a living, now something like porter wages no longer means anything to him, and he doesn't need them, because today is his first official appearance in his second life. Xinhua arrives at Dungeon K49, which he hasn't visited in a very long time. This is where the enraged magus is hiding in the double dungeon. But for now, the magus is definitely in an immature state and hasn't fully developed, and if left longer, it will consume dimensional energy and eventually turn into a deadly monster. Xinhua decides that he cannot remain a mere spectator while knowing what will soon appear in the world, and this would also be a suitable opportunity for him to test his combat abilities after the modification. But there is another reason for his presence here, and Xinhua tries to remember. If his memory hasn't failed him, there should now be a cancellation notice due to the irregular energy waves emanating from the dungeon. At that exact moment, the work team in the cave is called. They are informed that today's raid has been cancelled due to the discovery of irregular energy wave patterns. Xinhua smiles because what happened was exactly as he expected. One of the workers gets angry and shouts that they are all working day by day, and no one has the right to do this to them. One of the hunters responds, telling him that this is the situation, whether he likes it or not. This hunter is Sujan Hyun rank C and the leader of the raid team that was supposed to lead the operation today. He says this is the decision of the Korean Association of Awakened Hunters, and they have no choice but to comply with the orders. The worker looks at him with disbelief and annoyance, and finally tells him, reluctantly, that he understands. So then addresses the rest of the workers and hunters, telling them that they will cancel the raid and return the licenses for Cave 848 to the Korean Hunters Association, as they no longer need them. Xinhua interrupts him, asking him to wait a moment, and says that, since the cave's license still has some time before it expires, would there be any problem if he entered the dungeon? The hunter Su looks at him with suspicion, without responding or speaking. The foreman asks Xinhua what nonsense he is talking about. The hunter Su finally speaks, telling Xinhua dismissively that he is just an F-rank hunter, and that sometimes some porters recklessly want to try their luck by looting the dungeon. The Cave 848 is a rank D dungeon, which means that the raid team must meet the minimum requirement of for D rank members. In addition, the dimensional energy cells are currently unstable, which significantly increases the difficulty level. And he asks Xinhua if he thinks this is just a game or a movie, and if he wants to lose his life that easily and recklessly. The hunter Su's tone changes to a sharper one, and he asks Xinhua if he thinks they are just fools. Xinhua replies, telling him that he doesn't mean that at all and that he was just curious about the cave. The foreman shouts in Xinhua's face, telling him not to speak rudely to the raid team. Xinhua laughs artificially, saying that perhaps he went a little too far and asked for something impossible for a porter like him to enter a place that even the raid team leader doesn't want to enter. The hunter Su is irritated by Xinhua's words and says to him, "Fine, since the mysterious deaths of new porters during raids are common in dungeon raids." Xinhua laughs artificially like a fool. He thanks the hunter Su with fake gratitude. Su looks at him with contempt, knowing well what will happen to Xinhua inside. But Xinhua doesn't care about them at all, and continues on his way. The supervisor notices the situation and says that this could be very dangerous for him. The foreman looks at Xinhua as he walks away, asking what makes him so reckless today. Then he turns to the rest of the workers, telling them that since today is a holiday, they will have a drinking party, and the workers cheer happily at their boss's suggestion. They leave Xinhua to proceed into the dungeon, as he wanted. They begin celebrating, bringing drinks and partying together. The foreman asks the hunter Su what he thinks might happen to Xinhua inside, and what they will do if he finds a hidden treasure or valuable stones and becomes very rich. Su replies confidently, saying that is impossible, because from the moment his foot stepped into the entrance of this cave, he was sentenced to certain death. This is because of the monster known as the Wind Blade Mantis. Indeed, as soon as Xinhua ventures deep enough, he encounters those giant insects. They are larger than him and have sharp, powerful fangs. Xinhua knew this type of monster well. They are harsh, wicked creatures that attack in groups. The hunter Su continues speaking with the foreman, telling him that these monsters are originally rank D, but due to the disruption in dimensional energy and its irregularity, the energy and abilities of the monsters have increased significantly, and even without the current enhancement, they are capable of easily killing anyone. As for an F-rank hunter, he certainly doesn't stand a chance against them. Xinhua uses his modified abilities to strike at the giant insects, but they are numerous, larger and much stronger than him, and Xinhua barely manages to keep up with their movements. Xinhua notices that these creatures, after one of them falls, always set traps from blind spots. They appear to be emotionless, without any camaraderie. Thanks to his enhanced skills, Xinhua manages to overpower many of them due to his high speed and strength. His enhanced right arm acts like a solid hammer, striking the necks of these monsters to eliminate them. Xinhua feels confident and says, "Where are the sharp wine blade mantises? Defeating them is much easier than I imagined." Xinhua feels a great thrill at being able to move freely on the battlefield. After such a long time without fighting, he continues attacking the mantises, one by one with skill and agility. He grabs one of the mantises of the arm, telling it that he has dealt with its kind countless times in his previous life, which makes him well aware of the habits of such a creature. He begins gathering mana in his left arm. He tells the mantis that he's sorry, but he is an X-rank hunter, and a D-rank monster like it has no chance against him. Xinhua finally uses his transformation ability. He channels the mana from his left hand into a great flame that burns everything in front of him. He manages to wipe out the entire group of mantises. He stretches a bit and says that's enough of a warm-up before the real battle. Xinhua continues walking through the cave until he encounters a group of goblins. There are many of them, and they begin attacking Xinhua with their sharp weapons. One of them lunges first, targeting Xinhua, but it doesn't get anywhere near him. Xinhua grabs it by the head easily. Xinhua says that the exploding fist is always used as his finishing move, a technique he learned from a kind man long ago named Mok Chiel, and it is a technique that requires an immense amount of mana, which is why it truly reflects his current power level. Unfortunately, with his current physical capacity, he can only use it up to the second stage, but for a silly goblin like this, even the first stage will be more than enough. Xinhua prepares to deliver the blow to the goblin in his hand. He strikes with an incredible speed and lethal power. Indeed, he manages to kill the goblin in just one hit, and Xinhua feels that his current rank, determined by mana, is rank D. But if he adds his ability for physical modification and the exploding fist technique, it rises to rank C. He adds that in terms of instantaneous firepower, it may even reach rank B. After fighting around with the monsters, he notices that they have indeed had their strength enhanced and have become more ferocious and powerful. As he begins recalling memories from his previous life, he realizes that the disturbance in Dungeon 848 today was very advanced. The Great Sendorum catastrophe of 2030, which resulted in the deaths of many awakened individuals and civilians, was the work of the enraged magus, who had reached his final development here. Cave K848 is the same dungeon where this terrifying being was hiding, gathering and accumulating his power and evolving for 10 years. Xinhua thinks that although he believed the Korean Hunters Association didn't detect any strange signals throughout those 10 years, there was indeed a logical reason for that. Xinhua picks up the stone he found on the cave floor. He uses his enhanced eye technique searching for a specific location. He then finds the point he was looking for and feels a very strong barrier there. He throws the stone and discovers that there is a hidden place, confirming his suspicion. There is indeed a hidden double space with dimensional energy. This is why the Korean Hunters Association couldn't sense any growth of the enraged magus or predict its abnormal growth, because with the naked eye, it is impossible for anyone to notice or sense this barrier, which is why no one knew of the existence of a monster like the enraged magus throughout this entire period. Xinhua enhances the power in his arms and uses them to break the barrier that conceals the monster's dungeon. Bit by bit, the barrier begins to move with Xinhua, until he is finally able to shatter it completely. He opens a gate he can pass through. This entrance is to the hidden double space, which appears to be a place that exudes strangeness and absolute horror. Xinhua looks behind him. When he begins to hear a strange noise, he sees a strange bear-like monster emerging from the darkness. It rushes towards Xinhua in anger. It has a large number of eyes on its head, all of which are glaring angrily at Xinhua. Xinhua says that he was sure the mad bear of Magus would definitely appear. He says to the bear challenging it that he wants to test his skills. The enraged bear rages and attacks Xinhua violently. Xinhua is surprised by the bear's impressive speed. He tries to dodge the attack, but cannot, so he blocks it. He says that, as he expected, its raw power is insanely high, and if he hadn't reinforced himself in time, it could have been dangerous. But the bear doesn't relent on Xinhua at all. It launches a second attack, even more violent than the first. Xinhua is forced to quickly move away from it, thinking to himself that the bear is very fast, just as he expected, and that its combat instinct is not to be underestimated. He stands tall before the bear. He tells it that it is indeed strong and it would be better for both of them to stop wasting mana uselessly and begin the real battle. Xinhua looks at the bear challengingly, eager to attack it with everything he's got. The bear feels provoked, roars in anger and begins attacking Xinhua, but this time, Xinhua is faster than the bear and manages to move around it. He finds this the right moment to use his modified saliva technique to transform his bodily fluids into poisonous substances. Xinhua starts gathering saliva in his mouth, then he spits it out forcefully with high density, like a laser beam. The poisonous saliva enters the body of the enraged bear. The bear immediately starts to feel the symptoms of poisoning as the venomous saliva begins to flow throughout its entire body. Xinhua tells it that what it just drank is one of the most toxic bodily fluids. No one will be able to withstand it for long, even a giant creature like it. He takes advantage of this opportunity and rushes towards the bear at high speed. He knows that the bear's thick hide and muscular defense are much higher than rank C, which is why it was better to destroy or weaken it from the inside first, rather than trying to overcome it from the outside. Xinhua uses his modified right arm to deliver a finishing blow to the bear. Then he uses his transformation technique on his hand, turning it into a sword. This allows him to inject burning mana while using his left hand, which is responsible for mana radiation. He transforms the flaming fist attack into a flaming sword. Indeed, he manages to kill the bear, sending its head flying. The bear's body gradually collapses to the ground. Due to its massive size, its fall causes a loud noise and thick fog in the cave. This was what Xinhua expected to face from a rank C monster. He thanks God that he completed his body modifications. Otherwise he wouldn't have had enough mana to use the second stage of the exploding fist. Something on the ground catches his attention while he's thinking. Xinhua bends down to pick it up and examine it. He discovers it is a very rare artifact, a concealment ring, which is a rank C item that guarantees temporary invisibility for its work. Xinhua then extracts the mad bear's heart, deciding to eat it, as it will help him face the Magus, increasing his power by about 3 times for a short period. Xinhua thinks that this item could be sold at a very high price, and he feels regretful for using it now, but at the same time, he knows he cannot risk holding back on his energy. Meanwhile, outside the cave where the hunters had exited after the celebration, the hunter Su is bewildered while speaking with one of the responsible hunters from the Korean Association of Awakened Hunters, saying that this action was Kon Xinhua's own will. The foreman says that, if necessary, he can also testify that the first-rank porter, Kon Xinhua, acted alone and of his own free will. The member of the Hunters Association responds that the mana detector detected different mana interactions inside the dungeon. It is expected that these interactions belong to the individual Kon Xinhua. However, they cannot understand how this happened, and this is the opinion of Yoon Buell, a rank C hunter and the head of Team 7's management team at the Seoul branch of the Korean Association of Awakened Hunters. She continues asking how a rank F porter could survive and remain alive in a rank D dungeon, or rather a dungeon that has now reached rank C due to the changes that occurred in it. The foreman replies that her words make sense, and Hunter Su adds that the more logical assumption is that the detector is malfunctioning. Diel responds to him in a low voice, almost a whisper, saying that the detector is not malfunctioning, and it clearly detected that the energy coming from the dungeon is Xinhua's energy, and that Xinhua managed to survive inside despite how hard it is to believe. And she wonders to herself what Xinhua could be doing inside the dungeon up to now, and what is taking him so long to come out. Despite the survival rates for F-class hunters being close to 0, they now need to investigate the dungeon to understand the situation and clarify it, as well as recover any remains if an emergency occurs. Daewoo requests her artifact to be prepared and announces that she carry out the investigation herself. One of the hunters warns her that it might be dangerous, she goes alone, to which Belle responds that nothing will happen and that he knows well this is her specialty. By properly using her stealth and ambush skills, she will be able to conduct a simple exploration. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shakes violently and unexpectedly to the point that they believe an earthquake has occurred, but Belle assures them that it's not an earthquake or anything of the sort. Instead, it seems like the effect of a dimensional exit being created, and she thinks that this means the dungeon monster has already been defeated, something completely impossible for her to believe, until Shenhua dramatically emerges from the dungeon, apologizing for the chaos and saying that the provoked magus forced him into combat. This astonishes all the hunters and workers present, even B all can't comprehend what she's seeing. Shortly before this dramatic and unexpected exit, Shenhua was still consuming the heart of the raging bear, which tasted extremely awful. Shenhua was about to back out due to the terrible taste of the heart, but he got used to enduring tough situations and decided to finish it off completely. After he finally finished eating, he was fully prepared to continue the mission and eliminate the monster of the vast dungeon. Shenhua placed his hand into a crack in the dungeon wall and was able to see the angry magus inside. Upon entering, he found it standing there, massive in size, glaring at him angrily. Shenhua called the magus by name, astonishing the magus that Shenhua could speak his language, asking him how he knew how to speak like him and if they had met before, as he couldn't recall seeing a human like him. Shenhua remembered the incident from his previous life and told the magus it was natural that he couldn't remember it, then closed his eyes painfully as he remembered what happened in that incident. The large numbers that perished, including a dear friend of Shenhua whom he couldn't save. Shenhua opened his eyes, which were filled with intense hatred towards the magus, and said that he thought he could forget everything, but seeing him again brought back painful memories. However, he owes him a great debt, because on that day, in 2030, when he rampaged and destroyed the entire city, he caused Shenhua to lose friends and people dear to him. The magus laughed wickedly and told Shenhua that his words were quite interesting, and that it might indeed take about 10 years to reach his final evolved form. He was already thinking of committing massacres on the surface to get rid of useless humans. Shenhua shouted at him to be completely silent, saying that the time had now come to put him on trial for all the sins he committed against humanity. Then Shenhua shouted again, telling him to accept his fate quietly. These words provoked the magus, who asked Shenhua how he dared to say such things, and began attacking him violently, but Shenhua managed to evade the attack. So the magus used his heavy tail to attack Shenhua, and Shenhua managed to escape this difficult blow, though he realized that the magus' speed wasn't to be underestimated. So he enhanced his strength to avoid the violent attack, used the first form of the explosive fist and delivered a powerful blow to the magus' head with full force. The magus laughed maniacally and asked Shenhua if that was all he had, mocking him, asking how he thought he could do anything to humanity with such strength. The magus becomes infuriated and responds to Shenhua angrily, saying that if that's truly what he wants, then on that basis, he will turn him to ashes immediately. Shenhua knew about this attack and was already expecting it, understanding that he must avoid it at all costs. At the last moment, Shenhua uses his body modification ability, enhances the energy in his legs to jump high and avoids the magus' explosive fire attack. He notices that the magus' breath attack arrives just as he anticipated, accompanied by a dark dust cloud, as Shenhua predicted. Changing positions in mid-air is nearly impossible, and the magus takes advantage of this fact, preparing to exhale fire once more. And this was what Shenhua had been waiting for since the beginning of the attack. He moves around the magus' head and closes his mouth before it can exhale flames. Standing behind his head, thus placing himself in the magus' blind spot, he taunts him, saying that neither his claws nor his fiery breath can reach him here, and that the first step to defeating the magus is to reach his blind spot, a piece of information widely known in the future. Shenhua adjusts his teeth and enhances their strength to proceed to the second step, destroying the weak part of the magus' armored nape, and bites down forcefully on that part to cut through it, successfully causing cracks in the magus' armor. He starts to accelerate his attack pace, breaking more of the armor and further weakening it. The third part of his plan is to turn the tide by using his venomous saliva, and Shenhua bites the magus to inject the toxic saliva into his body. The last thing he does is enhance the power in his arm to be able to pierce the magus' heart with full force. But Shenhua's attack is halted by the magus who catches him, surprising Shenhua with the fact that the magus can still fight despite the paralysis-inducing toxins that were injected into his body. The magus becomes extremely enraged and bellows at Shenhua, telling him he will strangle him here and he won't go anywhere. He will be his prey today. Shenhua responds, telling him that the only prey here is him, referring to the magus. Shenhua uses the body modification technique to form a piercing, sharp spear. Shenhua manages to reach the magus' heart, deciding that this is the moment to finally avenge his friends, and stabs the giant with the spear, with immense force, successfully piercing his heart, and finally pulls it out, laughing triumphantly. Shenhua stands, takes a deep breath and begins to think, has he truly prevented the disaster that was about to befall the world? Has he even managed to avert the certain death that was destined for the people who were supposed to be in this dungeon at the time of the incident? But he finds no use in such thoughts. Now it's time to celebrate the victory. After the battle concluded, Shenhua managed to obtain some loot, among which was a first-grade dimensional stone containing the essence of two-dimensional magical power, which has countless uses, including being used in crafting weapons and armor. Shenhua wasn't sure how he could find this many stones from just a B-class monster. There was also another unique item called the Steel Flower, a generic term for items obtained from dungeon bosses, and upon consumption, it grants a special ability permanently. Unlike equipment-type items, it provides a skill equivalent to awakening. And there are various types of flowers, each representing a unique one in the world, which makes it an extremely rare item. Shenhua steps off the magus' lifeless body, saying that it's time to let go of the grudges and hatred of the past and open his heart to the new life he will now live. Shenhua thinks that, as its name suggests, the metallic blossom stone guarantees strength and resilience to the user's body. Shenhua consumes the item while continuing to think about its side effects, such as slowing down movement and consuming magical energy excessively and unnecessarily, which is why it wasn't highly valued in the hunter's community. However, thanks to his unique skill of modification and adaptation, bodily transformation becomes his area of expertise, allowing him to control the form appearance and the extent of the item's effect on his body. People with abilities to use flower items gain two awakening abilities and are called dual awakened hunters, which is what happened before Shenhua exited the cave and told them what happened to him inside. The head worker responds asking if he had been hiding this ability from them all this time, to which Shenhua replies that he had his reasons, but now the weak porter Shenhua from Class F has finally decided to abandon that title and that he is no longer in Class F, but has been promoted to Class D. Hunter Su remains in a state of amazement and shocks in Shenhua's exit, and Shenhua tells him that the dungeon has been cleared. There's no need to renew the permit now and that he's leaving. Hunter Su begins to process it, asking Shenhua to wait and not leave yet, inquiring about his rank and adding that even if he is Class D, this dungeon far exceeds his level, and may even reach team leader level, as it has surely reached a Class B dungeon level. Shenhua realizes that even with the nation's advanced technology, it would still be challenging for a Class D hunter, and if it weren't for his knowledge and experience with the magus, he'd now be lying at the bottom of the dungeon as a victim of this creature. Shenhua responds to Su, saying that this is 30 years of experience, and perhaps even if he told him it would be hard for him to understand. He pulls something out of his pocket and asks him to deliver it to the porters affiliated with the engineering college. Su asks him what it is, to which Shenhua responds that today's work has been cancelled due to the sudden incident, and that this stone will be enough to provide income for a month for all the porters present. This shocks Hunter Su, the head worker, and the workers themselves, as well as the other hunters. Shenhua hints to them that he has done what needed to be done, and now it's time for him to leave. Shenhua turns to leave, unable to believe that he's finally done it, that the thing he had dreamed of has become a reality. And now he can indulge in power and wealth at the age of 30 just as he had always wished throughout his past life. Despite thinking that something like this would be impossible for him, Shenhua's thoughts are interrupted by a hand placed on his shoulder. Shenhua quickly and violently brushes it off before it fully touches him, glancing back out of the corner of his eye and asking the identity of the person. It turns out to be the hunter, Bial, who tells Shenhua she didn't mean to scare or surprise him, and asks if he felt her magical energy, and that's why he reacted this way. But that means his senses are very sharp and strong. Shenhua turns to her and says that his reaction was violent and inappropriate, but he's used to being cautious and focused on everything happening around him. When he looks at her, he feels like he already knows her, as her features are not unfamiliar to him at all. He recognizes her as Buell and Buell begins to introduce herself, stating that she is Buell, a member of the Korean Hunters Association for the Awakened, and that she came here specifically to ask him a few simple questions. Shenhua remembers his past and recognizes that she is the hunter he met during the Great Catastrophe in his previous life. At that time, she was the strongest S rank hunter ever, but unfortunately, she died before reaching the X rank. Shenhua sighs in relief knowing that Buell no longer has to face that dreadful fate, now that he managed to kill the Mangas. He hears her questions, saying she learned that he stayed in the dungeon for a long time and still can't believe what happened. He replies that it's natural, as he has been an F-rank awakened hunter for a long time now, and that it's difficult for him to talk with her now because he's in a hurry. He hands her a piece of paper with his number on it, asking her to contact him if she has any questions. He quickly runs away from her, telling her that when they meet again, she shouldn't be so rigid and harsh as she is now, and should try to be more flexible. Buell keeps watching Shenhua in amazement, and receives a phone call. She answers, asking the person if they've heard today's news, telling them that she has something that will surprise them greatly, that the battle with the Mangas was intense and fierce and it was necessary to return the body to a stable condition. In the red zone, rumors spread quickly, and today's news will undoubtedly reach everyone and be broadcast widely if anyone is attacked by people searching for dimensional stones and homes. In a place filled with chaos and violence like the red zone, it would be difficult to predict what will happen to the person holding such a stone. Thus, the most realistic and logical solution is to sell the stone without wasting time in the red zone. There are many places that facilitate trades 24 hours a day. The next day, Shenhua stands on the balcony of his apartment thinking that just a few days ago, he was living broke and scared in an old apartment in the red zone, eating expired and basically inedible food. But now he enjoys the gentle breeze and beautiful view in his new home in the white zone while sipping the hot tea he prepared, although he hasn't yet reached the wealth and fortune he dreamed of in his previous life. His body is now that of a young man, and he has valuable time ahead of him. If he pushes himself a bit, he could expedite his path to early retirement, enjoying life and living in luxury. With the experience he possesses, the information and opportunities will only increase before him, as he has returned 32 years into the past and is now in the year 2020. His curiosity is piqued as he tries to remember what events and issues were linked to that year. He hears the news reporting that recently, during the discovery of one of the dungeons, a violent attack occurred due to some curse, and the daughter of the head of the Manhwa group, Jin Xiante, is in critical condition, fighting for her life, with her condition worsening over time. Xiante appears live on air, saying that he's not here as the head of the Manhwa group, but as a father of a child, stating that he urgently needs the help of any awakened people watching this broadcast. He says passionately that he wishes for even just one awakened individual to help save his beloved sick daughter. In the specialized medical facility of the Manhwa group, Jinbo sits on one of the medical beds watching her father promise special financial rewards to anyone who helps treat her. But her focus is interrupted by someone entering her room saying that he's here to play with her and have a joyful fun time together. Shenhua responded, stating that he was indeed the person in question. He then noticed that the girl standing next to her had familiar features, as though he had seen her before. He asked them whether they were affiliated with the Korean Awakened Hunters Association, and what individuals of such high standing were doing in this place. The girl introduced herself as Namina, explaining that she was the head of the Seoul branch of the Korean Hunters Association, and had come that day specifically to evaluate his abilities firsthand. She invited him to join the association, mentioning that the recruitment reward would be extraordinarily generous and unmatched by what any ordinary novice could receive. Shenhua already knew that the Korean Hunters Association was a national guild composed of the elite of the awakened world. While the association might consider this offer unprecedented, given their reluctance to make such proposals to low-ranking individuals, Shenhua recalled that if he had received a similar offer at the age of 25 in his previous life, he would have been so overjoyed that he wouldn't have been able to sleep for a week. Such an offer could easily bring an ordinary, awakened individual to tears of happiness. Namina interrupted Shenhua's thoughts, assuring him that special contracts were also possible. However, he surprised her by politely declining the offer. explaining that he had no desire to be tied to any specific organization. As night fell, Xinhua felt exhausted and worn out from the unexpected events of the day. He realized that the great calamity that turned humans into awakened beings had left a sinister and corrupting mark on people's hearts, regardless of how low-ranking some awakened individuals were. He understood that his future actions would attract the attention of many, making him a target for stronger individuals. For instance, people like Manhwa, who constantly measured skill and growth and could predict and prevent the movements of others. Xinhua pondered what he could do if he faced someone with similar awakened abilities. He activated the simulation system to visualize possible scenarios, but found that it caused significant mental strain. He began considering certain preparations that might assist him, and he recalled the magic orb, an artifact known for its ability to interact with magic and absorb specific energies, behaving in unique ways. The orb contained powerful magical energy that could be used for launching attacks, but no awakened being had ever managed to wield it properly. As a result, in Xinhua's previous life, it was considered nothing more than a silly relic, often used as a children's toy. Now, however, thanks to the bodily modifications that were the core of his awakened ability, he could store magical energy in his body parts as though they were batteries. Still, despite his current magical energy capacity being insufficient, if he could leverage his energy recovery ability effectively, a trait that set him apart from other awakened individuals, it might become a powerful weapon for him. Xinhua decided to leave his house and head toward a location where he expected to find the artifact, the 78th sector, an abandoned mine in the red zone. He enhanced the strength and speed of his legs and began leaping from rooftop to rooftop until he reached his destination. Before long, he arrived at the desolate area, which turned out to be a deep mine. He sensed magical energy in the vicinity, interacting with him, and used it to locate and draw the orb toward him, finally managing to seize it. However, due to its magical nature, holding onto it was not so simple. Wings of magical energy quickly formed around it, revealing that the purpose of an artifact of this caliber, classify as it was both to attack and to recover through magical energy. However, it possessed a unique personality, making it far from easy to handle. When Xinhua began channeling energy into the orb from his left arm and launched it with immense force at one of the walls, it caused devastating damage to the structure. Xinhua was pleased with its destructive power, which met his expectations. Suddenly, however, he sensed a strange aura, as though someone was committing a criminal act nearby. As he expected, he discovered that one of the outlaws was targeting Hunter Xiong Yonggan, an A+ rank awakened individual and a member of the Black Cross gang, who told Xinhua that this area belonged to them and demanded to know his identity. Xinhua already knew the identity of this person, the third executive of the Black Cross criminal guild, notorious in his previous life for his grim reputation as a hired killer. Unlike any other criminal in the red zone, he was a lunatic who committed crimes purely for his own enjoyment, making him extremely dangerous and best avoid. However, Xinhua, having reached his limit with this man, responded by saying that no matter how criminal the guild was, it was still too large an organization to tolerate a deranged lunatic like him. He added that the name Black Cross had deteriorated to the point where its mere mention was now a source of mockery. These words provoked Xiong, who decided to target Xinhua directly and began approaching him very slowly without saying a word. Xinhua observed Xiong's reaction carefully, knowing it would be unpredictable. Finally, Xiong spoke in a quiet yet chilling voice, declaring that anyone who insulted him or the Black Cross Guild met the same fate, a gruesome death, and that this fate awaited a naive child like him, who would be executed. Immediately, Xinhua realized the battle was about to begin, and indeed, Xiong launched his first attack. Although Xinhua anticipated the strike, he still took a powerful punch from Xiong. This was due to Xiong's extreme speed with punches that were nearly invisible. Xinhua accepted this as normal, since Xiong's abilities were on an entirely different level. Xiong's unique talent came from his vampire abilities, making him exceptional even among awakened individuals. Over time, Xinhua gradually adapted to Xiong's attacks and was able to somewhat dodge and keep up with his speed. However, Xiong did not rely solely on this type of attack. He also unleashed sharp blade-like strikes that Xinhua barely managed to avoid. Xinhua felt as though he wasn't fighting a human but a ferocious beast from the depths of the rainforest. To counter, he used a body enhancement technique to strengthen his muscles, then launched a fierce punch at Xiong, but Xiang skillfully dodged it. Despite Xinhua's attempts to deliver rapid, powerful strikes, Xiang evaded them all with skill far beyond normal human capabilities thanks to his vampire combat abilities. However, at the last moment, Xiang failed to dodge one attack completely, and Xinhua seized the opportunity to grab him by his clothes, preventing him from escaping further strikes. Xinhua declared that his eyes had fully adapted to Xiang's movements and began channeling magical energy into his arm. Finally, he delivered his first powerful punch directly at Xiang. However, Xiang, who now seemed like a true monster, minimized the damage by stopping the strike with his sharp teeth. Xinhua was startled by this unexpected turn of events, as Xiang exploded the situation, biting into Xinhua and throwing him violently. Xinhua didn't have enough time to regain his balance, and crashed hard onto the ground, coughing in pain. He realized the massive difference in power between himself and Xiang, particularly as Xiang was in a plus rank awakened, while Xinhua still had a long way to go to regain his former strength. Xiang approached Xinhua, who was still on the ground, grabbing him by the collar. With a sinister smile, Xiang said that he found Xinhua particularly special and would make a delicious meal. Immediately, he sank his sharp fangs into Xinhua's neck and began drinking his blood. Xiang felt immense pleasure at the taste of the blood, unable to resist it. Suddenly, however, the taste changed completely, and Xiang sensed something strange. He couldn't understand what had happened, as this should have been the blood of an ordinary person. At that moment, Xinhua used his enhancement technique to strengthen his right arm, pinning Xiang in place, which drove Xiang's fangs deeper into his neck. This was because Xinhua had modified the composition of his blood to include toxic substances. Xiang felt the danger and the effects of the poison closing in on him, struggling to resist. But Xinhua held him tightly. Both screamed in fierce defiance, each trying to take down the other. First in the end, as expected, it was Xiang who fell, unable to believe that a mere teenager had managed to defeat him. Xinhua discovered the Locust Bracelet, and a ranked item that enhances recovery from physical and mental fatigue. He felt satisfied to have obtained such an intriguing item. At that moment, several of Xiang's allies arrived at the scene and found him lying lifeless on the ground. Xinhua realized that reinforcements had arrived and decided to test the magic orb. He began channeling energy into it and prepared to unleash it on them. When Xiang's allies realized that Xinhua was responsible for what happened to him, they vowed to kill him, promising he wouldn't leave the area alive. They began using vampire techniques such as the blood bullet and monstrous transformations. One of them noticed Xinhua preparing to throw a strange object, but remained confident that the blood bullets would be faster. At that moment, one of them transformed into a feral vampire form and lunged at Xinhua. He attempted a sharp cutting attack, but Xinhua managed to dodge it at the last moment. Once the orb was fully charged, Xinhua launched it forcefully at them. The orb collided with the blood bullet, and both attacks were equally powerful and fast. However, the magic orb overpowered the blood bullet and struck the criminals directly, causing significant injuries. After they fell, the orb returned to Xinhua's hand. Smiling, Xinhua remarked that it was perfectly compatible with him, expressing his satisfaction. After finishing the battle and leaving the area, one of the guild's most dangerous criminals arrived, asking if the hunter named Kong Xinhua was responsible for what happened to Xiang. Zhang Man, the fourth-ranking guild member and an S-rank awakened, replied that Xinhua was just lucky and demanded the chance to kill him personally, without leaving any trace behind. Chang Wu Li, the second in command of the Black Cross Guild, and an S+ rank awakened, responded by asking him to remain calm, noting that while the rank difference was clear, luck often played a major role in battles like this. Man was visibly frustrated as he genuinely wanted to eliminate Xinhua. Chang Wu closed his eyes and contemplated deeply, then suggested that Xinhua might hold the antidote to save Xiang, so they shouldn't rush to kill him. He addressed Zhou Kun, the Black Cross Guild leader and an SS rank awakened, proposing they subdue Xinhua first and obtain the antidote before dealing with him. Meanwhile, Xinhua returned home, and thanks to his magic recovery ability, enhanced by his modifying organs, his magical energy was fully replenished by the time he arrived. Finally done evaluating his performance, he began planning his next move. Excited, he contacted the Yanghua Guild in anticipation of what would happen at the upcoming presentation. At the Yanghua Guild headquarters, whispers filled the crowded stands as attendees speculated that Xinhua had orchestrated the entire event. Rumors spread that he had cured Jin Bumi, even though she was just a mid-level hunter, and that he seemed overly arrogant for gathering everyone and creating such a fuss about an unknown presentation. Among the crowd was Taiho, who remarked to SEO that it should have ended with simply paying the reward to this person. SEO responded slyly, asking if he was jealous of Xinhua, though she herself doubted the significance of this sudden event that had drawn even the executives. She pointed out that if it were just empty boasting, it would negatively impact Xinhua's position in the awakened hunters community, adding that Xinhua was well aware of this and that it was better to hear the story directly from him. Jin Bumi stepped onto the stage and asked Xinhua about the nature of the presentation he intended to give. Xinhua explained that he had gathered them to officially introduce new items to the guild, items that had never existed in the awakened community, before he revealed a vial containing a liquid announcing it as his invention, which he called the Mana Potion. The audience was astonished, questioning the significance of what they assumed to be an ordinary bottle of water. To notice their reactions and expressed her own surprise, noting that while the potion appeared simple, the Yanghua Guild already had the best potions available, capable of restoring nearly 50% of magical energy at once, with a large-scale production line in place. Xinhua interrupted her, explaining that they had misunderstood, emphasizing that his potion restored 100% of magical energy. SEO and the rest of the attendees were left stunned and in of Xinhua's statement, who objected, saying that this was scientifically impossible, as the scientific consensus agreed that the human body could not absorb any chemical or natural substance at 100% efficiency. Xinhua confidently responded, clarifying that the potion was created using his exceptional regeneration ability, and offered for her to test it herself if she didn't believe him. Tu looked at him cautiously, not entirely convinced, but agreed to the test. They moved to the training room, where Bu began consuming her magical energy by executing difficult spells, quickly depleting a large portion of her energy. She used various types of magical techniques, growing more excited over time. As she no longer had to conserve her energy, she cast the catastrophic flame technique, and as her energy consumption increased, she seemed thoroughly exhilarated by the experience. Xinhua remarked that Bu's spells were truly impressive, to which SEO explained that spells are always influenced by the user's spirit and that Bu had a lively and cheerful personality. Finally, after a short while, Bu's magical energy was completely drained, and she announced that she was ready to test the potion. Xinhua handed her the bottle, and she drank from it. As the guild members watched in anticipation, Bu stood quietly, muttering in confusion that she didn't understand what was happening. Then with Zhou, she declared that she felt completely refreshed with no trace of fatigue, and that the potion indeed restored 100% of her magical energy. The energy measurements confirmed Bu's findings. CO, astonished, pointed out that the main cause of death for awakened hunters in dungeons was the depletion of magical energy. Taiho commented that if this could be prevented entirely, the potion could literally save their lives. Xinhua confidently announced that the potion was called Elixir. CO, so both happy and proud, emphasized that this was an achievement their guild needed to utilize to its fullest potential. At that moment, the guild leader entered, announcing that he had been watching the presentation from behind the curtain and had no choice but to acknowledge the greatness of this invention and commend Xinhua. He asked Xinhua how long he had been thinking about creating something so unique and remarkable. The elixir bottle was immediately circulated, and a contract was signed to supply 50% of the monthly production, exclusively, earning Xinhua $1 billion from what appeared to be a simple bottle of mineral water infused with a bit of his magical power. Gradually, the name Kong Xinhua began to spread throughout the awakened hunters community, and not just locally. His reputation started to expand on a broader scale. One day, Xinhua woke up feeling unusually energetic. He noticed that he had slept for many hours, which he found odd for someone still in his prime. He woke up close to noon and looked beside him to find incoming messages. One of the messages was from SEO Hai, informing him that a raid had been scheduled for Dungeon Koni 1 over at 8:30 p.m. with the meeting point set at Guru Station. The guild had arranged for equipment carriers, so there was no need for anyone to bring anything extra. Xinhua paused, realizing that his memory served him well, as Dungeon Koni 1 over was the location where the Flower of Ascension could be found. It was also where he could obtain the ingredients for the stimulus potion. That potion was an item that had appeared years later in his previous life, and was revolutionary for its ability to boost strength rather than restore it. Using such a potion during dungeon raids granted hunters extra experience points and valuable loot. As for the Flower of Ascension, Its function was to enhance mental capabilities, increase computational power and highlight fine details. These flowers grew randomly due to monsters, exposure to dimensional energy, and some could even grant special skills. However, there were also useless poisonous flowers, so anyone who found them shouldn't consume them immediately. This was a mistake Xinhua had made many times in his previous life, as Nicholas, their team leader at the time, would use him as a test subject and then laugh innocently, saying, "Be careful not to die." Drawing from his experience, Xinhua knew that Dungeon Koni 104 was classified as an A+ rank dungeon, and that acquiring the flowers required defeating the dungeon boss. For the first time, the main boss there was SS rank, a level far beyond ordinary monsters. Despite the skills of Yanghua Guild's awakened members, Xinhua knew that the assault wouldn't be easy for them either. Even SEO High, the strongest guild member at S+ rank, could lose her life if she stubbornly faced the boss head-on. Searching online for information about Dungeon Koni 1004's boss, Xinhua found, as expected, nothing useful. He recalled that in his previous life, when he was 54 years old, he had gained deeper wisdom as he aged, prioritizing things beyond just strength and money. During his search, curiosity got the better of him regarding Nicholas. He remembered that Nicholas had been the leader of the Nine Paths team in his previous life, and had prepared seriously for the apocalypse. Xinhua wondered if Nicholas had also returned to life just as he had. Xinhua searched for the name Nicholas Hagen, but found far too many people with the same name. Frustrated and bored, he wished Nicholas were here to take on this burden for him. However, he quickly regained his rational thinking, realizing that only a week had passed since his new life began, and that there were still 32 years left before the catastrophe. He set his priorities straight, acknowledging that what he needed now was to make money. Xinhua recalled that in his previous life, Nicholas had forced him to join the Nine Paths team under a ridiculous contract, as though leaving him with no choice. This time, however, Xinhua resolved to turn the situation to his advantage, planning to eventually have Nicholas work under him. Xinhua sought to invest his money in real estate, so he headed to an area near GG Station. The area was completely devastated, resembling a field of ruin. He knew the reason for this was the deadly fog that had spread after the catastrophe, turning the location into the fog of instant death zone. Despite the widespread destruction, Xinhua noticed that a few buildings were still usable. While inspecting the area, Xinhua noticed something strange. Two men were violently attacking another person, seemingly bullying him. The victim cried and screamed, saying he had given them everything they asked for. One of the thugs responded mockingly, declaring that it wasn't over yet, and that in this place, death could be considered an accident caused by the fog, making it impossible to report the matter to the Korean Hunters Association. Before the two men could finish their threats, they were shocked to find someone grabbing their heads. It was Xinhua who slammed their heads together violently. The men screamed in pain, unable to comprehend what was happening. Standing tall, Xinhua asked sarcastically if they were witnesses to the crime. Enraged, the two men prepared to attack him, shouting. But Xinhua was faster, easily dodging their strikes. Stunned by his ability to deflect their attacks, the men were quickly seized by Xinhua, who forcefully slammed them to the ground. During the fight, Xinhua noticed something unusual. The deadly fog was beginning to thicken around them more rapidly than expected. Xinhua called out to the man lying on the ground, instructing him to come closer and hold on tightly. The man complied, nervously and anxiously desperate to save his life at any cost. Xinhua did the man channeling energy into his legs and sprinted at full speed to escape the fog. During the escape, Xinhua noticed something odd. A wound on the man's leg, which he guessed was caused by some form of paralyzing poison. The man confirmed it, explaining that he had been poisoned by someone claiming to be awakened. As they spoke, Xinhua realized he knew this man. It was Cho Ji-hyuk, his former comrade from his past life, who was then known as Father Cho. Unlike most people in the awakened community, Cho was kind and humble. During the apocalyptic catastrophe in the year 2030, Father Cho had fought alongside Xinhua in the same area, trying to save as many civilians as possible. At that time, Cho insisted that Xinhua leave the area, promising to hold off the Magus as long as he could. He had shouted for Xinhua to take the child there and escape immediately. Xinhua had obeyed and begun fleeing, but the Magus tried to attack them. Xinhua managed to dodge the attacks and escape, but he was shocked by what Father Cho was about to do. He had tried to stop him, shouting desperately to dissuade him. However, Cho insisted, saying he was a member of the church and didn't want Xinhua to witness a good man dying before his eyes. Xinhua had stood frozen with hesitation, until Father Cho pushed him away, ordering him to leave. Father Cho then turned to face the magus, who became distracted with him. Instead of chasing Xinhua and the child, Cho had looked back at Xinhua shouting, "Stay alive as long as you can." At that moment, the magus had confronted him directly, his gaze burning with rage. Xinhua was moved as he recalled his memories of Father Cho and their reunion in this life. Cho noticed the tears in Xinhua's eyes and asked if the poison had affected him too. Xinhua replied that what he had done was merely returning the favor, adding that he would never hesitate to save his loved ones and those with special abilities from certain death. Xinhua remembered Nicholas Hagen's advice, which he had often repeated about turning points, the idea of altering an inevitable future through actions that hadn't occurred in the previous timeline. The more turning points were created, the more the future would diverge from the known history. Still, even if that were the case, Xinhua realized he wasn't like Nicholas. He couldn't remain rational when faced with his emotions. After escaping the deadly fog, Cho asked how he could repay Xinhua for saving his life. Xinhua responded that it wasn't worth worrying about at all. During sunset, they sat together on the train. Cho kept thinking about Xinhua, whom he had met that day, expressing his happiness at meeting someone as kind as him, and inviting him to have a drink together. Meanwhile, Xinhua headed toward Dungeon K1004. The team had already gathered in anticipation. The group included Yun Hoon, whose rank was a Jinbumi, who held the same rank, Yun Tae-hu an S rank, Awakened Seo, he an SS rank hunter, and finally, Kan Xinhua himself, who was also an awakened of this rank, who happily told Xinhua that this was his first official mission as a contractor with the Yanhua Guild, adding that while the dungeon's rank might be high for him, he wouldn't need to act as the primary attacker, but should focus on team coordination. Xinhua gladly agreed, who then addressed the equipment carriers, instructing them to stay in the background for a while. However, Xinhua objected, saying there was no need for equipment carriers. To reply, explaining that leaving behind dungeon loot wasn't something to take lightly, as delays in entering could reduce the loot's value. Xinhua reassured her confidently that there was no need to worry at all. Suddenly, something happened that left everyone stunned. Xinhua pulled out the magic orb from his personal subspace, explaining that this space could be used to store any necessary items. Du responded in amazement, saying she had heard of subspace before, but had never imagined seeing it with her own eyes. Tae-hu, equally surprised, remarked that such a capability must be due to an extremely rare artifact. Seo asked Xinhua how he kept unveiling such unique abilities, jokingly noting that the equipment carriers were lucky to get a paid day off, even though the dungeon itself was extremely dangerous. The carriers were overjoyed at not having to work that day, and began praising Xinhua enthusiastically. As soon as the raid team entered the dungeon, terrifying monsters appeared, including the dark armored beast classified as a plus rank. Seo shouted a warning about the sudden influx of monsters and ordered Xinhua to stay back while the team prepared for battle. Yun Hoon initiated the attack, but Xinhua, who knew Dungeon K110 well, was already familiar with its layout and terrain, recognizing that the key to success lay in the team's coordination. Seo led the formation, launching a counterattack against the monsters with precise teamwork. Each member used their own unique techniques, with Tae-hu unleashing ice-based attacks, while Bu deployed explosive flame techniques that wiped out large numbers of monsters at once. Even Xinhua himself was impressed by their combat tactics. Seo instructed Xinhua to hold back and focus on observing for now. Du added that the armored beast had extremely high defense, so sticking to team coordination was best. Xinhua found the situation somewhat ridiculous, feeling they were trying to protect him from harm. Determined to ease their concerns, he decided to take action. Bu, meanwhile, paid little attention to him, happy that the plan was proceeding smoothly, and encouraging him to simply watch. However, Bu was suddenly startled when she looked around and realized Xinhua was no longer beside her. She began searching for him, unaware of the monster sneaking up behind her. Seo noticed the danger just in time, and quickly intervened, using her own summoned beast to protect Bu. Bu was shocked, realizing what could have happened had Seo not acted in time. At that moment, Xinhua returned to them, dragging a monster behind him, and explained that he had gone to deal with some monsters on the other side. Du was stunned and asked how he had managed to capture that monster, noting it was an A+ rank creature, and wondering how he handled it alone. Xinhua replied confidently saying she had underestimated his skills a bit. Bu inspected the monster and questioned the strange scars on it, noting that it seemed as though a special combat technique had been used. Xinhua smiled confidently and explained that he possessed a set of secret skills. He began listing them, mentioning the explosive punch taught to him by Mok Kale along with 5 out of 10 martial arts techniques, the first explosive style, the second pressure style, the third violent attack style, the fourth flame style and the fifth lightning style. SEO commented that they had underestimated his abilities and urged him to show them what he was truly capable of. Xinhua saw the approaching monsters and agreed, saying it was time for him to demonstrate his real power. He rushed toward the swarm of monsters, carefully channeling energy into his body while being mindful of conserving it. Using a small amount of energy, he transformed his left arm into a sharp blade, attacking the monster's weak points, particularly the soft areas between the head and the armor plating. Xinhua utilized the first explosive style, successfully defeating one of the monsters, though it consumed nearly 70% of his magical energy. This enraged the monsters, which charged at him with violent aggression. Xinhua targeted the monster's abdomen, where it was unprotected by armor, and used the third explosive style to take it down. Soon after, the enhanced armored beast, ranked as appear and prepared to attack Xinhua. Du and Tehu were shocked by the appearance of the creature, noting that it was on an entirely different level from the previous monsters. However, Xinhua managed to block the monster's attack before it could reach him. He used his enhanced abilities to push the beast back, temporarily delivering a blow powerful enough to send the monster flying a considerable distance. With only 50% of his magical energy remaining, Xinhua laughed confidently, announcing that it was time to move to the next level of his plan. He maximized the flow of magical energy through his body and unleashed the fifth lightning style known as Earthquake. After defeating a large number of monsters, his magical energy was completely depleted, dropping to 0. Standing confidently atop the monster's defeated corpse, Xinhua faced the astonished team, who looked at him with eye and admiration. SEO admitted that he had completely surprised them and left them speechless. At that moment, another monster appeared before them, but Tehu intercepted it successfully, excitedly announcing that thanks to Xinhua, they had discovered the monster's weak point. He called out to Yunhun to activate his ability. While Xinhua prepared his energy together, the two launched a combined attack on the monster, managing to take it down. With that, the last monster in the dungeon was defeated, marking the raid as complete. Du remarked that the raid had taken only 5 hours and 50 minutes, which was half the usual time required to clear dungeons. SEO replied that this accomplishment was thanks to Xinhua's presence, and that the guild leader would be thrilled to hear about completing the mission in record time. Tehu enthusiastically added that it was finally time to collect the loot. However, Xinhua seemed surprised that they considered the mission over. He pointed toward another gate, explaining that the dungeon boss, Badge, was still waiting for them. Bu explained that Badget was an SS-ranked monster whose full abilities had yet to be identified, and that confronting it would be extremely difficult, despite how smoothly things had gone so far. Xinhua calmly replied that he knew a possible way to deal with the situation, prompting Bu to ask him for details. After Xinhua explained his plan, the team stared at him with sharp, incredulous looks. Xinhua understood their skepticism. It was justified, as no hunter of his rank should speak so confidently about facing an SS-ranked monster. Yanghua Guild had attempted to defeat it multiple times, but all efforts had ended in failure. However, after witnessing Xinhua's strength and intelligence during the battle, the team began to seriously consider his words. SEO asked if what he said was truly possible and what conditions he needed to assist them. Xinhua explained that since the boss had never been targeted before, there was a high chance of finding the monster flower, and the only condition he had was that it would belong to him. SEO thought deeply about his request, recognizing that such flowers were extremely rare and highly coveted. Even Bu began to consider it, especially since securing the dungeon's path would greatly benefit the guild in terms of safety and profit. Tehu broke Bu's thoughts by asking whether she agreed to Xinhua's condition, noting that facing the dungeon boss for the first time carried the risk of the flower not appearing at all. Bu hesitated and asked Xinhua if he was prepared to risk everything and leave empty-handed. Xinhua smiled innocently, saying he would do his best, and if nothing came of it, he would consider it part of his duty. Yet deep down, he was certain the flower would be there. Du responded that unfair loot distribution did not align with the guild's policies, and that even if he obtained the flower, he would still need to receive a share of the loot. Xinhua replied that as long as no one sustained severe injuries, they should focus on using mana potions to recover. Everyone began drinking their potions, but Bu noticed that Xinhua hadn't taken anything. She asked him why, to which he replied that he was busy using his body modification technique, which allowed him to regenerate his magical energy without the need for potions. Everyone was astonished, particularly Bu and SEO, who expressed their admiration for Xinhua's incredible ability. Once the preparations were complete and the team had recovered their strength, they proceeded to face Baji and eliminate him. SEO playfully teased Taehu, warning him not to slack off, to which he grumbled in frustration, saying she had repeated the same comment 3 times. Bu laughed and joined the teasing, reminding Taehu of his earlier solo attack that had ended in failure. Taehu defended himself, explaining that he had only wanted to test a new skill he had learned. Xinhua observed how light-hearted and cheerful the atmosphere was, despite the mission's difficulty. Even SEO noticed, commenting that this was Xinhua's first mission with them, and yet, despite his critical role, his expression showed no signs of tension or anxiety. She wondered silently what Xinhua was hiding behind this calm demeanor. After the light-hearted conversation, the team finally reached Baugolair. Even before they saw him, they felt the weight of his intimidating aura. Their expressions turned serious, recognizing that the guild had failed multiple times to defeat him. Daj possessed immense destructive power that exceeded the limits of defensive enhancement suits, which had become essential gear for all awakened hunters. The problem lay with monsters that surpassed the equipment's capabilities, as a single strike from Daj could cause instant death. Thus, the only way to approach the fight was to avoid taking any direct hits. Xinhua engaged in a fierce and intense battle against Daj, while the Yanghua Guild team observed cautiously. The monster's attacks were neither slow nor weak, yet Xinhua dodged them with incredible agility. The team recalled Xinhua's earlier strategy, which highlighted both the advantage and risk of Baye's wide area strikes, requiring attackers to diversify their offensive approaches. Acting on this, the rest of the team joined the battle, and under Xinhua's guidance, they felt as though they could clearly see the monster's attack patterns. They began to understand why Daj was classified as an SS-ranked monster. Given his extraordinary destructive power, Xinhua realized that attempting a direct attack would be risky, even if he used the steel flame technique. Yonhu noted several opportunities to explode, and launched a fierce attack on Daj alongside Taehu. SEO joined them, attacking from the left with her summoned beast. Meanwhile, Bu drank her mana potion, and entered the battlefield to support the attack. She unleashed one of her powerful fire spells, Jin Fa Formation, a large-scale fire assault. SEO noticed that Bu had become particularly enthusiastic casting powerful, wide-range spells. She realized this was because Xinhua had successfully drawn the monster's attention toward himself, giving the team an opportunity to expand their attacks, especially Bu's fiery spells. Xinhua was already capitalizing on every strike the team made to weaken Daj, and he noticed that the monster's attacks were becoming slower and less effective thanks to Bu's support and her spells that impeded its movement. Just as Xinhua prepared to lunge at the monster, SEO shouted a warning, alerting him that the monster had now turned its attention toward Bu and the rest of the team. Xinhua looked up to see the monster closing in dangerously, making it nearly impossible to avoid the attack. Kong-hun grew anxious for Bu's safety, worried she might get hurt. At that moment, Xinhua activated the muscle enhancement technique, successfully blocking Daja's attack and pushing it away from the team. Xinhua landed on the ground with a triumphant smile, proud of having saved them from a deadly strike. Xinhua recalled his earlier discussion with the team about the second strategy to defeat Bajik, which relied on uniting both attack and defense roles. Rather than limiting the defensive members to just defense, they needed to actively strike as well. Xinhua amplified the flow of energy through his body, while Bu decided to implement his advice and combine both offense and defense. At the moment, Xinhua charged at the monster with full force. Bu surrounded the battlefield with powerful fire spells. A coordinated attack formed between Xinhua and Bu, restricting Bajik movements and reducing its defensive capabilities. The attack inflicted devastating damage on the monster, which was nearly impossible to avoid. The rest of the team stood in awe, unable to believe the success of the attack. Indeed, Xinhua obtained the dimensional flower, a rare and high-level bloom. Xinhua consumed the flower and noted that it tasted like lemon. The flower was known as the Transcendence Flower, enhancing computational abilities and improving focus on target-related information. Xinhua was suddenly struck by a headache, a clear sign that the flower's effects had begun. Du noticed Xinhua holding his head, in pain, and asked if he was okay. He replied that he was experiencing a slight headache, but then was surprised when the flower's ability activated, revealing precise details about Bu, from her height and weight to various other specifics. Embarrassed, he apologized, explaining that he hadn't intended to learn all that information. Bu, confused by his words, simply kept her puzzled expression. Nonetheless, Xinhua felt happy knowing he was now one step closer to his goal of early retirement. After the raid ended, news reached President Tay that the team had entered the dungeon boss's chamber. The president grew anxious and tense, particularly since he hadn't been informed of their plan to face the boss. Despite his confidence in Sio's abilities and decisions, he remained concerned about the developments. He wondered whether the team had succeeded or if they needed backup and reinforcements. Suddenly, he received a message confirming that Dungeon Koni 1 offer had been cleared successfully. The president was stunned by the news, but felt both joy and relief realizing that Kon Xinhua was an exceptional person who had exceeded even his expectations. At the same time, near the dungeon's exit gate, the workers were surprised to see the raid team emerging without any significant injuries and much faster than expected. Xinhua opened his personal subspace and informed the workers they wouldn't need to enter the dungeon to transport the loot manually, as he had already brought out the essential items. The workers were delighted, grateful for the time and effort Xinhua had saved them. One of the workers called out to his colleagues to begin the final preparations. Immediately after completing the mission, Xinhua returned home to recover the magical energy he had consumed during the battle. He used his magical energy to heal his body and recover from injuries, while also taking the opportunity to strengthen his digestive system. Xinhua reflected deeply, realizing that his body's recovery ability had been the reason for his survival. Without the Yanhua Guild team's high-level support, he might not have made it out of the boss's chamber alive. This realization reinforced his determination to further advance his rank, knowing that in the awakened world, strength is law, and without power, a hunter is vulnerable to harm and trouble. Xinhua recalled that the title the Unrivaled Hunter was only given to those with the highest magical energy. He felt fatigued and his stomach began to cramp due to the intense effort he had exerted, realizing he had taken significant risks with his body modifications. This time, the modification was successful, and Xinhua advanced to the D+ rank. He was confident that with the next body adjustment he would reach rank C. Eager to test his new digestive ability, Xinhua picked up a piece of scrap iron lying on the ground. He ate it boldly to see the effect of the modification, and found that the process was smooth and problem-free. Moving to the next step, he tested the impact of the body modification on his abilities. His right arm was supposed to transform into stainless steel for 30 seconds, every 5 minutes. Sure enough, Xinhua successfully executed the transformation, observing that his arm had turned into a sharp stainless steel blade. To test another ability, Xinhua ate a piece of medilo meat, a material that increased skin defense by 10% for 30 seconds every 10 minutes. Xinhua noted that these abilities would be incredibly beneficial in the future, and wondered if their duration would increase as his rank improved. He continued experimenting, consuming various materials to test his new physical capabilities. Xinhua knew he needed to increase his overall magical energy to advance to a higher level, and he identified the crystal boar as the ideal target for this. The crystal boar had an impressive ability to store magical energy, but despite its striking appearance, the dungeon's loot had never been particularly useful. However, if Xinhua could absorb its magical abilities using his new consumption skill, it would be immensely beneficial for his growth. Xinhua expected to attack the dungeon alone, but it was under the jurisdiction of the Korean Hunters Association. Xinhua knew that advancing directly could get him into trouble with the association's president, Namina. Elsewhere at Bu's residence, she received a call from Xinhua. Surprised and slightly worried about his late-night call, especially after they had spent the day together, Bu picked up. Xinhua explained that he was calling to ask for a favor. Bu asked what he needed, and Xinhua told her he required her help to secure a permit to raid a specific dungeon. Bu asked if he could share the reason, to which Xinhua replied that he wanted to avoid any conflict with the Korean Hunters Association, so he didn't want to apply himself. Bu told him she would need some time to arrange it. Xinhua understood that using an alias wasn't illegal, but was far from simple. Issuing a license under someone else's name would require guarantees, something difficult for a rookie hunter like her. Feeling exhausted, Xinhua decided to get some sleep in preparation for the next day. As Xinhua drifted into a deep sleep, the door to his room slowly creaked open. A suspicious figure dangled from the ceiling, muttering that he had finally found his target. The intruder was Park Sang-hyun, an rank-awakened hunter. Park quietly surveyed the area, trying to sense any movement inside the house, but he noticed a shadow behind the curtain. Convinced that Xinhua had sensed his presence and was ready to counterattack, Park believed he had the advantage, as he could clearly detect Xinhua's energy, allowing him to launch a surprise attack. Park drew a sharp dagger from his pouch and pulled back the curtain, only to find no one there. He stepped further into the room, sensing magical energy, and struck toward the source. To his shock, the source was nothing more than a coat hanger and a magic orb. As Park struggled to process the situation, Xinhua launched a sudden electrifying attack, using his enhanced abilities, knocking Park to the ground with a powerful blow. Xinhua stood calmly over him, fiddling with his camouflage bracelet, remarking that Park's stealth techniques were outdated and poorly executed. Xinhua explained that he had spread magical caves throughout the room, which allowed him to detect Park's presence. He infused energy into his hand, warning Park not to underestimate people based on their ranks. Park, terrified at the sight of Xinhua's glowing energy, quickly surrendered, promising he wouldn't attack yet. Contrary to his words, Park's hand moved slowly toward his dagger. Park activated one of his skills, assassination technique, attempting to kill Xinhua. With a crazed shout, Park declared that he was an elite assassin who wouldn't lose to a child like him, claiming his dagger could tear through flesh and crush intestines. However, Xinhua reacted quickly, transforming his body into its steel form. Completely avoiding injury, he lunged at Park, grabbing him by the head and slamming him violently to the ground. Severely injured, Park realized that he had gravely underestimated Xinhua, who was far stronger than he had imagined. Xinhua spoke in a threatening tone, warning Park not to move. He assured Park that escape was no longer an option, then demanded to know who had sent him. Asking if it was Jo Kun-ho, Park was stunned that Xinhua knew about this. Jo Kun-ho was the leader of the Black Cross Guild, a highly dangerous man with a bounty of 500 million won issued by the Korean Hunters Association. Xinhua stated sharply that Park didn't even seem like a member of the Black Cross Guild, but just someone given a minor task. Park initially remained silent, but Xinhua's patience wore thin. Threatening to deal harsher blows, Xinhua forced Park to speak. Finally, Park revealed the existence of the Black Forest, a dark information network established by an alliance known as the Triad of Evil. This alliance consisted of 3 major guilds: the Black Society Guild, the Trio Guild, and the 5 Stars Guild. Listening carefully, Xinhua abruptly ordered Park to call Jo Chen-ho. Once the call connected, Jo Chen asked if Park had captured Xinhua. Without warning, Xinhua snatched the phone, addressing Jo Kun in a mocking tone. "Who do you think you are thinking you can capture me?" Xinhua continued to provoke him, taunting that it would be better to face him directly instead of hiding behind others. Jo Kun tried to maintain his composure, ordering Xinhua in a sinister tone to hand over the antidote that could save Zhang Xiang in exchange for being left alone. Xinhua replied in a bored voice, remarking that Jo Kun's loyalty to Zhang Xiang was impressive, before offering him a single vial of the antidote for 1 billion won. The offer provoked Jo Chen, who snapped angrily, claiming that Xinhua had no idea who he was dealing with. Xinhua further irritated him by saying he wasn't afraid of a coward hiding in the shadows and suggesting he focus on gathering the money instead of making threats. Xinhua knew that provoking Jo Chen was the only way to draw him out of hiding, even though he also realized that Jo Kun wouldn't move without a well-laid plan. Jo Chen, now seething with rage, threatened Xinhua, declaring that he had made an enemy of the Black Cross Guild and that he wouldn't stop until Xinhua was dead, even if it meant the end of the world. Xinhua suddenly dropped the call, saying that Jo Kun wasn't worth any more of his time. At that moment, Xinhua heard the faint sound of movement and turned to see Park trying to sneak out of the room. Once Park noticed that Xinhua had spotted him, he froze in fear, overwhelmed by the thought of what this lunatic might do to him. In the world of the awakened, news spread incredibly quickly. Du called Xinhua anxiously, asking if he was okay or if he had been hurt, as she had heard rumors about an assassin breaking into his home to kill him. She admitted she had been terrified that he might have been injured without her knowing. Xinhua tried to calm her down, teasing her by saying her voice sounded like a wounded hamster and that the incident had been nothing but unnecessary noise. Bu, still concerned, told him he needed to find a safer place to live, as facing dangerous enemies alone was impossible. Xinhua replied understandingly, saying that perhaps he should indeed consider moving to a more secure location. Continuing the conversation, Bu informed Xinhua that the permit for Dungeon K9, 1383, which he had requested had been approved by the Korean Hunters Association, but with conditions. Xinhua, surprised, asked about the nature of these conditions. Bu explained that the association wanted him to undergo training first with one of their guild agents to ensure his competence and safety. Xinhua was taken aback by this unusual requirement and asked Bu if it had been discovered that he was the one who had applied for the permit. Bu hesitated, apologizing and saying she had done her best and that this was all she could manage. Xinhua reassured her, saying there was no need to apologize. After ending the call, Xinhua prepared for the day, contemplating the possibility that he might have unintentionally attracted the attention of someone important, which had complicated matters further. He thought back to Nicholas Hagen, who had always been cautious and brilliant at concealing his abilities, often talking about the butterfly effect and turning points. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone. Expecting a call from the Hunters Association, Xinhua was surprised to see that the caller was Father Cho himself. Several hours later, Xinhua found himself at Shinchan Station in Korea with Cho. The Hanyun Guild had the best global advertising, surpassing the boundaries of South Korea. It was the dream of every awakened hunter. Both Xinhua and Cho were taken aback by the glittering view of the station, which looked completely different from what they had imagined. The reason for their visit was Xinhua's desire to explore new areas. In his previous life, he had only known battlefield and ruined lands, which he had always visited alongside Nicholas. Cho squinted, complaining that the sunlight was bothering his eyes, urging Xinhua to hurry inside. Xinhua knew the real reason for Cho's hurry was that his vampire abilities conflicted with exposure to sunlight, making his role as a priest perfectly suited for him and shielding him from both mental and physical strain. Cho brought up the day Xinhua had saved him and expressed his heartfelt gratitude, but Xinhua replied that there was no need for formalities between them, as he wasn't a fan of excessive politeness. The two entered a restaurant, ordered food, and exchanged light conversation. Xinhua felt immense happiness finally being able to sit with Father Cho again. Cho mentioned that he had heard many rumors and stories about Xinhua, saying that the entire internet was talking about him lately. Laughing, Xinhua asked what kind of things people were saying. Cho replied that most of the chatter was about Xinhua joining the Yanghua Guild, healing President Chen Bumi's daughter, and even inventing a new healing item called the Elixir. Xinhua smiled playfully and winked, joking that the matter was still top secret and that it might as well be true. Cho replied seriously that it would be better to keep matters like that secret, as revealing them would cause significant turmoil. He then began talking about how he had started as an E-rank hunter, eventually advancing to E+, adding that he was determined to improve himself, to achieve accomplishments similar to Xinhua's, despite knowing how difficult that would be. Xinhua replied casually, stating that his current rank was only D+. Cho was stunned, asking how Xinhua could have done so much despite such a modest rank. Xinhua smiled, explaining that in their world, rank wasn't everything. Xinhua noticed that most of the people in the restaurant were members of the Hanyun Guild. Cho explained that all the surrounding buildings were owned by the Hanyun Guild, a massive guild known for providing many services to its members. Embarrassed, Cho admitted that he dreamed of joining a guild like Hanyun or any other major guild. Confessing his envy of guild members, Xinhua asked if that meant Cho wasn't currently part of any guild. Xinhua thought back to his previous life, when he and Father Cho had formed a perfect team, their abilities complementing each other flawlessly. Xinhua silently felt some regret for Nicholas, but he also knew he needed a peaceful retirement. Rather than returning to the Nine Paths team, he decided to build his own forces from the ground up. Xinhua considered making an offer to Father Cho, but his thoughts were interrupted when a member of the Hanyun Guild bumped into him, causing a drink to spill on the table. Xinhua apologized, despite not being at fault, but the guild member arrogantly replied that an apology wasn't enough, pointing out that his shoe had been stained with juice and that mere words wouldn't make it clean again. Xinhua glanced at the shoe, seeing only a minor stain, but he began to feel irritated, especially since it wasn't his mistake. As Xinhua remained silent, the man escalated the situation, slamming the table violently. Another guild member joined in, grabbing Xinhua by the collar and saying that disturbing their leader came with a price. Cho grew anxious, worried that the situation would spiral into a fight, especially as the other diners in the restaurant began to notice that the troublemakers were from the Hanyun Guild's self-defense team. Everyone knew of their terrible reputation for being brutal, even towards civilians. One of the men sneered at Xinhua, saying it would be better for him to kneel and apologize and they might let him go. Cho tried to calm things down, apologizing on Xinhua's behalf and urging him to apologize to end the problem. However, Xinhua remained silent and provocatively responded, calling them boas. Xinhua's words infuriated the guild members, causing them to lose their tempers. The situation spiraled out of control as the self-defense team lunged at Xinhua. Yet things did not go as they had expected. Xinhua effortlessly knocked all of them to the ground. Within minutes, he threw them out of the restaurant entirely, then turned to Father Cho and casually asked him to tally the damages and costs. Cho stood in stunned silence, shocked by Xinhua's unexpected strength and the speed with which everything had unfolded. At that moment, Xinhua stepped out of the restaurant, but the guild members got back to their feet, determined to seek revenge. They attacked Xinhua again with the same formation and tactics. However, as before, Xinhua easily defeated them, his strength, speed and superior combat experience overwhelming them. Frustrated to their limits, one of the men drew a knife, charging it with magical energy. He then rushed at Xinhua. In response, Xinhua activated the steel reinforcement technique to form a defensive shield over his body. Before the attack could land on Xinhua, another person intervened, stopping the strike. The person turned to Xinhua with a cold, commanding tone and asked if he was Kan Xinhua, the one everyone had been talking about. The figure was none other than Mok Jinwoo, the leader of the Hanyun Guild himself and awakened of SSS rank. Mok Jinwoo regarded Xinhua carefully, his piercing gaze scanning him from head to toe. Xinhua was surprised to see Mok Jin himself, and the scuffle immediately ceased upon his arrival. Mok Jin commented that they had caused quite a mess and ruined the atmosphere completely. Turning to Xinhua with a smile, he said he was happy to see him there anyway, and invited him to accompany him to the guild building for a private conversation. Xinhua, annoyed and frustrated, replied that he had been enjoying his time with his friend until Mok Jin's guild members ruined it, and since the fight was over, he would simply resume his meal. Mok Jin gave a chilling look to the guild member who had provoked Xinhua, causing the man to stammer nervously, trying to justify his actions by claiming that Xinhua had been the one to bother them first. But Mok Jin coldly asked for his name and identity, not giving him a chance to respond before ordering him to immediately and sincerely apologize to Xinhua. The man hesitated, but Mok Jin's patience ran out, and a hint of anger showed on his face. Terrified, the man surrendered and apologized to Xinhua without daring to meet his guild leader's menacing gaze. Mok Jin then smiled innocently, remarking that apologies were good. However, Xinhua read through his act, realizing that the smile was nothing more than a public facade. He knew that Mok Jin was far from easy to deal with, closer to a psychopath who only revealed his true nature in isolated settings. Mok Jin then turned to Xinhua and personally apologized for what had happened, offering him a chance to improve their relationship in the future and handing him a gold guild card. Xinhua knew it was merely a free access task, but it came with the privilege of meeting Mok Jin immediately. He replied that he would think about it. Xinhua and Cho left the area and sat on the steps away from the chaos. Xinhua told Cho that the Hanyun Guild had covered the cost of all damages to the restaurant. Cho praised Xinhua for his fighting skills, remarking that his combat style didn't reflect someone of the D+ rank. He added that an awakened person's strength typically aligned with their rank, but Xinhua had displayed a unique ability to enhance his body. Xinhua replied that ranks only reflected a person's internal energy capacity. Neglecting to develop one's skills and abilities could lead to being defeated easily by lower-ranked opponents, as demonstrated by the thugs he had just taken down. Continuing their conversation, Xinhua told Cho that he wanted to finish the discussion they had started before the incident. Xinhua then offered Father Cho a spot on his team. Surprised, Cho assumed that Xinhua was trying to recruit him for personal gain. Xinhua clarified that he was considering forming a team and needed Cho to be a part of it. Cho humbly responded that he was just an E-rank hunter and lacked the talent and ability Xinhua possessed. Xinhua understood that Cho's physique was unique, and that his true talent had yet to shine due to his low confidence, deciding to help him. Xinhua hinted at Cho's hidden potential, suggesting a simple method to overcome his current developmental barrier. Cho was delighted by the suggestion, and eagerly asked Xinhua for details. Xinhua explained that Cho should focus on maintaining his magical energy cycle continuously, rather than increasing it all at once. Cho was surprised and asked how Xinhua had known about that, explaining that his limited magical energy had forced him to do so out of desperation. Xinhua recalled that in his previous life, Cho had faced the same problem, but eventually became one of the rarest awakened hunters. Xinhua believed that having Cho on his team would be a great asset, as he was meticulous and detail-oriented. He advised Cho to train, using this method for a week, reminding him not to overstrain himself when his magical energy was depleted, and to rest until fully recovered. Xinhua assured him that the method would work as long as he continued practicing. At the Korean Hunters Association headquarters, a massive organization responsible for regulating awakened hunters and apprehending criminals, Xinhua endured long and tedious procedures that annoyed him greatly. After a long wait, Buell finally arrived, apologizing for her delay. Buell found Xinhua visibly irritated, and at the end of his patience, gratefully, Xinhua remarked that he was relieved someone had finally shown up. He teasingly asked her why she was late, claiming he had arrived before her despite the tiresome administrative process. Smiling, Buell admitted that she knew how dull the administrative procedures were, but reassured him that she was now there to guide him to his next destination. Xinhua noticed that Buell's smile seemed somewhat forced, and he couldn't help but compare her to Namina, the Asukation's guild leader, who exuded strength, elegance and authority. Buell's presence, in contrast, lacked the overwhelming aura that Namina carried. When they finally arrived at their destination, Xinhua was somewhat surprised. He was meeting Lee Ha-shan himself, the Director General of the Korean Hunters Association, and an SSS-ranked awakened. Lee Ha-shan was a figure surrounded by an air of mystery in every respect. Even in Xinhua's previous life, Namina had spoken on his behalf and Li Haiyan had rarely made public appearances. Li Xian asked Xinhua if he was there for the permit test, to which Xinhua replied affirmatively. Smirking, Li Xian sarcastically commented that the administrative process must have annoyed him greatly, admitting that there were many complaints about how convoluted the Asukation's procedures were. Xinhua politely replied that such complexity was understandable, especially when dealing with dungeon raids authorized by the stately Ha-xiang smiled approvingly, thanking Xinhua for his positive outlook. At that moment, Xinhua felt a sharp pain and a strong headache, realizing that Ha-xiang was using a mental control skill to try to read his thoughts. Xinhua knew that Ha-xiang's abilities allowed him to scan thoughts, read his opponent's abilities, and even pinpoint their weaknesses. However, Xinhua couldn't understand the purpose of this covert scan. Despite his irritation at the intrusion, he constructed a thick magical barrier around his mind to protect himself from manipulation. Ha-xiang, realizing Xinhua's ability to defend himself, asked him casually if the weather was cold today. Xinhua replied calmly, agreeing that it was indeed cold. Biao, watching their exchange with a puzzled expression, couldn't understand why they were suddenly talking about the weather. Ha-xiang then turned his attention to Biao, commenting that she seemed to be having a difficult time lately. He then faced Xinhua again, thanking him for his hard work and expressing that he had been pleased to meet him today. Xinhua responded with a formal smile, while maintaining his magical mental defense. After Xinhua left, Director Ha-xiang went to meet with Namina, who asked for his thoughts on Xinhua. The director replied that Xinhua was extremely skilled. Namina was surprised by the description, knowing that it implied the director's mind-reading skill had failed. The director explained that Xinhua had been able to completely block the scan. Namina remarked that Xinhua's abilities far exceeded their expectations, especially given his young age. The director added that Xinhua was hiding many secrets and had likely concealed his true identity while previously working as a porter. Namina agreed, stating that something must have changed to push Xinhua into action. The director admitted that this uncertainty made him suspicious, especially with his failed scan, but he noted that he hadn't sensed any malicious intent from Xinhua. If Xinhua didn't turn criminal, he could become a powerful asset to the country. Namina concurred, suggesting it would be best to monitor him from afar. Both turned their attention to the screen, eagerly awaiting the start of the training fight. After putting on the training suit, Xinhua entered the arena. Scanning the area, he noticed Biao standing in one corner. Using vision enhancement, he expanded his field of view, realizing that the director and Namina were observing him from behind the wall. At the same time, both Namina and Ha-xiang watched the scene with anticipation. Biao informed him that if he succeeded in this match, he would be granted the dungeon attack permit. She explained that the highest levels of safety would be ensured during the fight. If the durability of the protective equipment dropped below 10%, an alarm would be triggered and the match would be stopped. Xinhua acknowledged the instructions, stretching his muscles and preparing for the duel. Bile then told him that his opponent was highly experienced and capable of clearing dungeons alone. She revealed that his opponent was Huang Junhyun, an rank awakened. Xinhua noticed that Huang's center of gravity was tilted slightly backward with his right hand extended in a purely defensive stance. He deduced that Huang was a range fighter, a weakness Xinhua planned to exploit. If Huang lost his distance advantage, he would be forced into a hit-and-run style of combat. As Beale prepared to start the match, she raised her whistle. Xinhua decided not to attack first, choosing to observe his opponent initially. He saw Huang shift his left foot backward, preparing to retreat. Once the whistle blew, the fight officially began. Xinhua charged toward Huang, quickly addressing him confidently and saying it was an honor to face him in this match. However, Huang suddenly disappeared from view. After 2 minutes, Beale noticed that the duel had become completely unexpected. Many had predicted Xinhua would fall within the first 20 seconds, a logical conclusion given the rank disparity. Even Huang himself was baffled by Xinhua's ability to keep up with him. How could Xinhua anticipate his movements and respond as if he already knew what Huang would do? This realization deeply provoked Huang, who was determined not to let the fight end in such a way. Beale observed that Huang had abandoned his defensive techniques and unleashed one of his powerful offensive skills. This shocked Beale, as she hadn't expected Huang to feel so threatened that he would try to end the battle quickly. Yet Xinhua skillfully dodged the attack, leaving Beale stunned by his evasive abilities. Even Huang was surprised and impressed by Xinhua's capabilities. Though he had prepared for such a possibility, since Xinhua was now mid-air, Huang assumed it would be impossible for him to dodge the next attack. The large-scale technique he had used earlier had merely been a distraction to prepare for a stronger, more dangerous move. However, Xinhua smirked confidently, having already devised a countermeasure. Suddenly, Huang realized his energy was starting to waver. He attempted another attack, but failed again, unable to understand what was happening. At the same time, Namina and director Hashian watched in shock. Namina asked the director if Huang had suffered internal injuries from the previous exchange, but Hashian denied this, explaining that the earlier strike had only targeted the external protective suit. The director revealed that Xinhua had precisely targeted Huang's mana line, causing a temporary disruption in the flow of magical energy within his body and creating an energy shock. Namina refused to believe that Xinhua had done it intentionally, calling it mere luck. The director firmly denied her claim, explaining that the targeting had been completely deliberate. He clarified that if Xinhua had wanted to inflict greater harm, he could have aimed at other weak points. The director elaborated that the mana line was like the bloodstream for magical energy, and if it was struck with precision and care, the flow of magical energy could be temporarily disrupted. Even if the effect was short-lived, Xinhua's ability to execute it demonstrated his exceptional skill and experience as a fighter. Xinhua capitalized on Huang's vulnerability and unleashed a series of powerful successive kicks. Both the director and Namina observed that Huang had become completely unable to fight. The alarm sounded, declaring Xinhua the winner of the match. Huang collapsed to the ground, exhausted as Xinhua delivered one last strike. Xinhua sighed, showing no visible signs of fatigue. As he watched Huang, Xinhua reflected deeply, realizing that his opponent's failure stemmed from his lack of experience in handling this type of confrontation. Still, he considered this duel a learning opportunity for Huang as well. Daewoo approached Xinhua and handed him a towel, remarking that the match had been incredible. Xinhua asked if that meant it was over and if he would finally receive his dungeon attack permit. Beale replied that she would follow up on the matter and update him soon. Meanwhile, medics transported Huang for treatment and recovery. Xinhua noticed the way Daewoo looked at Huang and wondered if she saw herself in him, particularly since in his previous life, she had been known as the Shadow Witch and Empress of Assassination. Xinhua remembered that Beale had risen to the SSS rank in his previous life, but had died during the final battle before the Great Catastrophe. He believed that if she had joined the Nine Paths team and pushed beyond her limits to reach the X rank, she could have survived. However, he also knew that working under a conservative organization like the Korean Hunters Association had hindered her from realizing her full potential. Leaving the arena, Xinhua changed out of his combat gear into his regular clothes. Walking with Bile, he asked about the next steps to complete the permit procedures. Then, surprising her, he brought up an unexpected topic, asking her for her honest opinion about the Korean Hunters Association. Taken aback, Byol asked what exactly he meant. Xinhua explained that he had noticed the hunters there were loyal and devoted, but they didn't truly enjoy their abilities. As awakened, he told her he believed the association wasn't the best place for her to nurture her talent. Ignoring his comment, Byol said she would pretend she hadn't heard anything. Xinhua smiled warmly, knowing the idea had already started to take root in her mind. He bid her a kind farewell, saying he had enjoyed meeting her today. As he left through the exit gate, Byol remained deep in thought. After obtaining his permit, Xinhua decided to create the Stimulus Elixir, a combat-enhancing potion that increased combat ability by 1.5 to 2.5 times without any side effects. The elixir invigorated the body while calming the nerves, making it a valuable asset for awakened hunters in battle. Xinhua began gathering the required ingredients, such as toxic catra herb, skeleton beast powder and medillo beast remains. Xinhua knew this formulation was unexpected, even in his previous life. With this, he had invented both the mana elixir, which restored magical energy by 100%, and the stimulus elixir, which enhanced combat ability. In a world where people risked death for even a small chance of survival, these elixirs were technological breakthroughs that would cause an uproar and introduced to society. Monitoring the elixir's purity, Xinhua found it perfectly suitable. As he continued preparing more batches, the repetitive process began to bore him. To distract himself during the waiting period, he reflected on the year 2020, a chaotic period filled with strange incidents and events. That year had witnessed a full-scale war between awakened associations in America and Europe, a parasite outbreak in China, where otherworldly organisms contaminated mass-produced mana potions, a major internal war between the top 3 guilds in Korea, and a massive epidemic that swept across Russia known as the Great Catastrophe. These 4 events led to the deaths of many prominent awakened individuals in each country. Xinhua remembered his conversations with Nicholas Hagen, who had foreseen these events in advance, thanks to being a time-returned awakened. Nicholas had always told Xinhua that he was a genius returner, capable of identifying individuals with the potential to reach the X rank before they had even advanced past ranks A or F. Unfortunately, due to the events of 2020, many of these talented individuals died needlessly, disrupting preparations for the Great Catastrophe. Because of those circumstances, Xinhua had been forced to delay an important appointment. Nicholas had repeatedly told Xinhua that he hadn't originally been one of the core members of the Nine Paths team, and that he had planned to save many people in 2020. However, since many of them died before he could reach them, Nicholas decided to place all his hopes on Xinhua. He had often joked that Xinhua was lucky because the people ahead of him on the list had all perished despite his role originally being ranked 35th. Xinhua seethed with anger as he recalled Nicholas deceiving him. However, he reasoned that if he could resolve these issues now, he would have no need to participate in the Great Catastrophe battle in the future. His eyes glimmered with determination as he regained his enthusiasm fueled by the hope of achieving early retirement. Xinhua celebrated this milestone, as it marked the first time he successfully crafted the potion, proud of its strong and vibrant color. Leaving the potion to purify for 2 more hours, Xinhua decided to visit Master Huang to pick up his combat suit. To save time, he enhanced his physical abilities and sped toward the old blacksmith's workshop. Upon arriving at Master Huang's place, Xinhua found the workshop as messy as always. The elderly blacksmith was engrossed in his work when he was startled by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. The visitor called his name, and to his surprise, it was Marina. As soon as she reached the door, she tossed a juice bottle at him, but Xinhua caught it swiftly before it hit his head. The old man was stunned by the rarity and price of the juice, but Marina nonchalantly explained she had found it easily. Marina praised Huang's craftsmanship, mentioning that her grandfather always said Huang's skill exceeded even the SS rank. Surprised, Huang confirmed that it had been a long time since their last meeting, and asked if old man Kin Tetsu had told her that. He then inquired why she was in Korea. Marina replied that she was searching for someone named Kan Xinhua, who she heard frequently visited this place. Huang confirmed that Xinhua often came to him and described him as no ordinary young man. Marina mentioned that Kan Xinhua's guild was soon hosting a conference to discuss the elixir. Huang asked if she was referring to the dream potion that restored 100% of magical energy. Marina confirmed, adding that she wasn't here as a representative of Team Osaka, but in another capacity. The old man speculated that she was representing the World Awakeners Association. Marina looked at him with admiration, confirming that he was as sharp as his reputation suggested. Hwang replied that the Korean Hunters Association wouldn't take kindly to this. Marina countered that recruiting talent wasn't bound by rules and that everything could be bought with money these days. Suddenly, they heard footsteps, and Marina asked Hwang if he was expecting anyone else. The old man replied that only one person would show up at this hour. Xinhua then appeared equally surprised. Marina beamed with excitement upon seeing Xinhua and remarked that she hadn't expected to meet Korea's rising star here standing stunned. Xinhua asked if she was really Hera Marina. Marina, puzzled, asked how he knew her. Feeling flustered, Xinhua recalled that Marina had been his comrade in the Nine Paths team in his previous life, and that he wasn't supposed to meet her for several more years. He quickly covered up, saying he was interested in overseas awakener communities and had heard about her. Turning to Master Hwang, Xinhua explained that he needed a new combat suit. Hwang asked if he wanted it with the same specifications as before, and told him to wait while he worked on it. Sitting down, Xinhua felt uneasy under Marina's scrutinizing gaze. He realized that Marina wasn't just any awakener. Her current rank was supposed to be S+. Breaking the silence, Marina finally told Xinhua that she would attend tomorrow's conference on the Elixir, hosted by Xinhua's guild, Yan Hua. Xinhua asked if that was the reason she had come, to which Marina replied it was her official reason, but she also had a personal one. When Xinhua asked about the personal reason, Marina stated bluntly that she disliked beating around the bush and offered him the opportunity to join her directly or collaborate with the World Awakeners Association. Xinhua was taken aback by her unexpected and straightforward proposal. The World Awakeners Association was a prestigious international organization that brought together powerful awakeners from across the globe. It offered countless opportunities and services while maintaining relations with other organizations such as the guilds of Korea and China. Xinhua seriously considered her offer, knowing that gaining access to the association's influence and licenses for rare dungeons would significantly accelerate his growth. Noticing his thoughtful expression, Marina suggested he start with a guest membership to experience working with them without any commitment. Impressed, Xinhua complimented Marina on her negotiation skills. She replied that negotiation was her specialty and that she wouldn't pass up the chance to recruit rare talents like him. Marina bade farewell to Master Hwang and left while Xinhua sensed that things were becoming far more interesting. Later at the Yan Hua Guild, Yunhoon grumbled about being forced to work late by Xinhua. He prepared a mobile vault to safely transport the elixir supplies. Xinhua had chosen him specifically for his skills and exceptional abilities, ensuring the transport process would face no issues. After the transport was completed, Yunhoon informed Xinhua that the funds had been transferred. Checking his account, Xinhua saw that he had earned over 6 billion won, not including the lands and stocks he had already purchased. Xinhua thought about his old dream from his previous life, retiring to an island in the south and enjoying a peaceful life. Now, that dream felt closer than ever. Especially after being constantly busy since his return to this life, he felt it was time for a short break before continuing his missions. In the Yanghua Guild's conference hall, tension filled the air as attendees questioned the validity of the elixir. Announcement: the concept seemed illogical to them. If major medical institutions had failed to develop such an invention, how could a single person succeed? Doubts escalated, with some accusing Xinhua of fraud and claiming he aimed to collect funds and disappear, especially given his current modest rank, which made the production of a full mana restoration potion seem unlikely. After some time, the conference finally began. Bu pointed out to Siwu that the top 20 ranked guilds were all present. Bu expressed her frustration at the murmurs of skepticism, realizing they had come to verify the claims for themselves. Siwu responded that they were secretly envious of Xinhua. Even Mak Junwoo, the leader of the top-ranked Hanyun Guild, and Xinjiana, leader of the second-ranked Cheongyun Guild, were also present. Bu commented that the presence of these two fierce rivals in one place could lead to a major conflict, but their calm demeanors showed just how important Xinhua had become. Siwu added that Xinhua must feel enormous pressure. Jiu became nervous at the thought and worried Xinhua might make a mistake. However, Xinhua noticed Bu's concern and appreciated her kindness. Though his mental age far exceeded his current physical age, and little could rattle him anymore. While scanning the crowd, Xinhua was surprised to see Marina among them, smiling at him in encouragement. He also spotted other, from his former Nine Paths team, An unexpected development. Ki So-yeon Wuxin from China, who looked much younger now, and Ayla Blanchett from Australia, with her usual calm expression. Xinhua realized their presence was unexpected, even though this was the time for their stars to rise. In his previous life, it was Nicholas Hagen who had brought them together. Thanks to his plans, they had faced the great catastrophe, and without him, they might never have met. Xinhua decided not to rush into building relationships with them now, preferring to wait for the day Nicholas would gather them, as he had in the past. Until then, he wished them well. Taking his place at the podium, Xinhua welcomed everyone and thanked them for coming. He began explaining his invention and the details of the elixir. The audience's intense reactions mirrored those of the Yanhua Guild when he first introduced it. Initially, they had doubted its existence, suspecting the measuring equipment was faulty, but after countless tests, they had no choice but to acknowledge the elixir's ability to provide full mana restoration. Now, the attendees competed fiercely to secure it at any cost. Noting that the quantities Xinhua could produce were extremely limited, tension among the attendees escalated as they acknowledged that even ordinary mana potions were rare, let alone a potion that offered complete restoration. Even a single bottle was worth fighting for. The conference slowly turned into a bidding war, with guild leaders and key figures declaring they would exceed budgetary limits for even one bottle, and insisting that receiving just 2 bottles a month would be sufficient. Questions were then directed at Xinhua about how he had created the potion and whether it was due to his unique talent. Xinhua confidently replied that it was indeed thanks to his exceptional abilities, as no one could have created something like this by chance. One of the attendees asked, "If you've had this potion for a while, why wait until now to announce it? Or does it involve consuming a certain type of flower?" Xinhua laughed, telling them to focus on questions related to the elixir itself, emphasizing that he was the only one capable of producing it. During the conference, Marina received a secure email on her phone. She opened it to find a message from the World Awakeners Association. The message stated that a high-ranking figure in Asia classified as Ranka had expressed great interest in Xinhua and had approved the report on the enhanced potion, requesting all available quantities. Marina was surprised that this prominent figure was now taking action, as they rarely appeared or showed interest in anything. After the conference concluded, Xinhua returned to the guild leader's office. Du greeted him enthusiastically, praising his presentation and asking how he felt about the event. Xinhua replied that the atmosphere had been overwhelming, pointing out the many questions aimed at uncovering the potion's development process. Du informed him of the negotiation results, announcing that they had agreed to sell all 15 available bottles. Xinhua remarked that the reaction was extraordinary but expected. Du continued, explaining that she had rejected all requests for personal meetings with him. Xinhua thanked her for her diligence. Du then revealed that the auction price had skyrocketed to 7 billion won per bottle, and after deducting fees, the net profit would be approximately 997.5 billion won. Xinhua was astonished, visibly moved by the massive earnings from selling just a few bottles. Turning to Siwu, Xinhua asked if it was possible to receive the elixir sales profits in advance. Siwu replied that she would consult with the guild leader for approval, adding that the guild was willing to offer such conveniences, provided their collaboration was mutually beneficial, to ensure long-term cooperation. Before Siwu could finish her sentence, Xinhua interrupted, saying, "All right, that works," and left the room at an incredible speed, leaving everyone stunned by his abrupt manner. Siwu turned to Bu and commented, "Today, I finally understand something." Du waited expectantly for her to continue, and Siwu added that Xinhua was incredibly experienced. Despite being only 25 years old, he carried himself with the maturity of someone far older. She expressed concern that Xinhua's special monthly contract with their guild would end in February, after which other guilds would undoubtedly attempt to recruit him. As Xinhua prepared to return, he received a call. The caller was Marina, who asked if he was free now because she wanted to discuss the enhanced potion they had spoken about earlier in detail. She sent him the address to her residence, and after a short while, Xinhua arrived and rang the doorbell. Marina's voice responded, saying the door was open and that he could come in. Xinhua entered and immediately noticed the luxurious surroundings, exactly as he had expected from the residence of a World Awakeners Association official. When Marina saw him, she looked somewhat surprised. Xinhua noticed her reaction and apologized, saying he hadn't meant to surprise her, but the door was open. Marina smiled and said he was much nicer than she had imagined, adding that he had a calm and friendly side that hadn't shown during the conference. Xinhua felt awkward and struggled to respond. Marina cut straight to the point, asking if he had brought the enhanced potion with him. Xinhua told her the potion was called Stimulus, and prepared to explain how it worked, but Marina interrupted him, saying she had heard that the potion could raise a user's rank by at least 1 level, with no side effects. She added that she had initially thought it was a joke, but after seeing the elixir, she couldn't help but believe it. Xinhua pulled the potion from his pocket and handed it to Marina, telling her she should try it herself to confirm. Marina took the potion and drank it in 1 gulp, then admitted he was right that experiencing it firsthand was the best proof. Immediately, she felt energy surging through her body, accompanied by an exhilarating and intense feeling of excitement. Marina realized that the potion had indeed boosted her combat rank by 1 stage and increased her combat ability by no less than 200%. Marina summoned her puppet warrior and began weaving threads of silver energy to control it. Turning to Xinhua with a challenging tone, she declared that she wanted to fight him in a duel. Xinhua protested, saying it wasn't fair, since she was S-ranked while he was only D+. Marina laughed, replying that someone like him shouldn't be concerned with such trivial details. Suddenly, a powerful energy field materialized, forming a training arena around them. Marina explained that the field was strong enough to last for a long time, even if combatants above S rank were fighting. Xinhua agreed to fight, but only if it would be 1 duel. He began channeling his mana, enhancing his entire body, and making necessary modifications to handle combat against an S+ hunter. Marina, in a tone full of challenge, told him to give it his all, because she wouldn't hold back at all. The two entered into an intense battle, each trying to prove their strength and skill to the other. Marina quickly noticed that Xinhua didn't rely on raw physical power alone. He was incredibly skilled at using strategy. Xinhua expertly countered Marina's puppet warrior, his reactions sharp and swift, managing to block the puppet's attacks no matter how strong or fast they were. Marina started to realize that the reports on the K-11 dungeon raid and the Shinshin station battle hadn't done Xinhua justice. His movements were precise and fluid, as though he had trained for decades and gained extensive combat experience. Marina remained focused on him, but Xinhua surprised her with his rapid, unpredictable movements. Keeping up with her puppet's attacks, he delivered one of his devastating punches, the 5th explosive fist, and scolded her for spacing out and overthinking, telling her to focus on the fight, warning her that she'd lose otherwise. Provoked by his words, Marina responded with fury, accusing him of needless arrogance. She doubled the puppet's mana supply, dramatically, increasing its strength and speed. Sarcastically, she apologized for being gentle with him. So far, the puppet launched a series of rapid and powerful attacks, to the point that Xinhua struggled to block its strike. 6 at one moment, he took a direct hit, but managed to activate his steel reinforcement ability at the last second, minimizing the damage. Thanks to his prior knowledge of Marina's combat style from his previous life, Xinhua was able to predict her attacks. He began to anticipate the puppet's movements and evaded them with exceptional skill. Eventually, he completely avoided the puppet and headed directly toward Marina at high speed. Marina was startled by his speed and tried to retract her puppet, but it was already too late. Xinhua reached Marina and transformed his hand into a sharp blade, pointing it at her neck to signify his victory in the duel. Xinhua told Marina that this was the price she paid for not fully focusing on the fight. Marina admitted her mistake and praised his intelligence for exploiting the puppet's weak point. She acknowledged that she needed to improve that flaw to ensure it couldn't be used against her again. Xinhua then asked if her puppet was truly a rank. Marina responded that this duel had another purpose, to test whether Xinhua was worthy of meeting a very important figure in the World Awakeners Association. Xinhua was shocked by her words, knowing that this important figure was mysterious and rarely appear in public. He wondered why she was acting down, especially since the World Awakeners Association and the major American group Pelio weren't just ordinary guilds. They had played significant roles in preparing for the great catastrophe in his previous life. Xinhua remained suspicious, feeling that these organizations were hiding something, and questioned what he could offer this figure. Marina broke his train of thought, saying she wanted to begin negotiations regarding the sale of the enhanced potions. She reminded him that he had said earlier, the World Awakeners Association would have priority if they submitted an official request. Xinhua replied that he had initial conditions, prompting Marina to ask what they were. Xinhua explained that he wanted ownership of 2 dungeons affiliated with the association, along with the freedom to raid any dungeon he chose. Marina agreed to his conditions and began negotiating the price for the enhancement potions. Marina offered to buy 100 bottles for 500 million won each. Xinhua saw this as a highly profitable deal and an easy way to amass wealth. After concluding the negotiations, Marina invited Xinhua to stay and have a drink before leaving. Xinhua declined, explaining that it was already late. He suggested that they have lunch together sometime soon. Marina smiled and said she wouldn't mind asking him to choose a day. Xinhua replied that he would let her pick the place and time, and that he would personally accompany her. Marina smiled with a slight blush. Xinhua told her to let him know when she was ready to discuss the details of their next deal. Marina laughed and told him that he was far more practical than she had expected. At that moment, Xinhua overheard a news broadcast on the television about the Caribbean islands, Cronus, Linear, Bestacia and Achotes located in the South Pacific. These places were renowned for their unique flora and stunning tropical scenery, making them popular tourist destinations. This stirred within him his old dream of living a quiet retired life, a dream he had been unable to achieve in his previous life. At the international airport, Xinhua boarded Flight 706 bound for Jeju Island. He felt excited about this new experience, especially since he had plenty of time before the next dungeon raid, and saw it as a perfect opportunity for rest and relaxation. As he settled into his seat, he heard the sound of rapid tapping beside him. Turning to look, he noticed that the person seated next to him appeared nervous, trembling while tapping on the armrest. When he turned to see their face, he was utterly surprised. It turned out to be Yoon Byul, who was equally shocked to see Xinhua. She cried out in disbelief, asking, "What are you doing here on this plane?" Xinhua asks Byul about the fortunate coincidence of meeting her on the plane. Byul, flustered, doesn't respond directly. Xinhua, puzzled, questions her about her pale face and nervous demeanor. Byul tries to feign calmness and awkwardly laughs, saying she's not pale, but was simply surprised to see him, as she hadn't expected it. She explains that she's heading to Jeju Island for work. However, Xinhua doesn't buy her story, and senses she's hiding something. Being a member of the Korean Awakeners Association, her serious demeanor suggests something dangerous is happening on the island. At that moment, the pilot announces that the plane is preparing for takeoff and asks passengers to fasten their seatbelts. Xinhua notices the device Bayo is holding, a dungeon detector used to track her energy within dungeons. The detector shows a high-energy radiation reading, leading him to suspect a monster outbreak and that the situation is extremely dangerous. He begins pondering why mana energy surging from the monsters at such an intensity. Observing further, he notices that Byul is wearing an enhanced suit, indicating she's preparing for a battle. Upon arriving on the island, Xinhua decides to dismiss the matter, saying to himself, "Why should I bother with someone else's work when I'm here to enjoy a relaxing vacation?" Resolving not to dwell on it, he focuses on his plan to have a peaceful break. Clearing his mind, he falls into a deep sleep until the plane lands on Jeju Island. Upon arrival, he's greeted by heavy rainfall, which dampens his expectations for the vacation somewhat. With no transportation available due to the weather, he's relieved to spot a passing taxi and quickly hails it. Shortly after he reaches his luxurious accommodation, and the opulence of the place washes away his disappointment from the gloomy weather. The first thing Xinhua does is head to the pool, diving in to release all his built-up tension, enjoying unparalleled relaxation. He feels an overwhelming sense of happiness, believing more than ever that money is the key to true joy. Comparing his current life to what it would have been like had he stayed with the Yanghua Guild for the past 2 days, he concludes that taking a short break was the right decision. He vows not to repeat the mistakes of his past life, where he hoarded wealth but failed to enjoy it, ultimately dying without achieving anything significant, despite his immense fortune. Meanwhile, Byul heads toward the source of the mana surge. The road is rugged and winding. Increasing her anxiety, she is determined to reach the site before the situation worsens. The crisis is escalating quickly, with only one stage left before a full-blown outbreak. A phenomenon where dimensional energy suddenly spikes, leading to a flood of monsters or even the formation of a new dungeon. Outbreaks are highly dangerous and unpredictable, often resulting in numerous casualties. Should a new portal form on the island, the civilian population would be in grave danger, compelling Byul to hasten her pace. Bile was dispatched for this mission due to her unique skills in stealth and rapid reconnaissance, making her the ideal candidate for handling such emergencies. At the Dimensional Energy Monitoring Facility, the staff grows increasingly anxious as their devices display alarming readings. The system confirms that the outbreak has reached stage 4, indicating the situation is far more critical than anticipated. They immediately contact Biel to provide an update. Biel responds firmly, stating that allowing the monsters to spill out would endanger civilians and cause severe casualties. Suddenly, a giant, ferocious rabbit monster attacks her. Ready for combat, Biel draws her sharp dagger and begins to fight. Soon, a swarm of wild, oversized rabbits rushes at her. Realizing she can't take them all down alone, Biel resorts to throwing explosive orbs. The rabbits appear confused when the orbs don't hit them directly, but instead strike the surrounding rocks. Biel's strategy is to contain the situation first, as she cannot allow the monsters to escape the area. Pressing the detonation button, she causes the rocks to collapse onto the rabbits, trapping them and reducing the flow of creatures from the portal. Biel calls headquarters, reporting that she can only contain the situation for another 30 minutes, and urgently requests reinforcements. The response is that the outbreak might also affect nearby dungeons in the region. Biel realizes that senior officials in the association are preoccupied with managing the broader situation. While Biel struggles to come up with a solution to the dire situation, only one person comes to her mind who might be able to help Xinhua. At that moment, Xinhua is enjoying his vacation when his phone rings. Answering without checking the caller ID, Xinhua casually remarks that he's on a pleasant vacation, and any work-related matters will have to wait a week. Biel panicked shouts into the phone, telling him the situation is extremely urgent and she desperately needs his help. Surprised, Xinhua realizes it's Biel calling. She explains that a critical dungeon outbreak has escalated to stage 4, and the situation is spiraling out of control. She tells him that she has tried containing the outbreak, but only has 30 minutes left before the monsters start rampaging again. Resigned, Xinhua asks for her exact location. Shortly after, he arrives at the closest accessible point to the dungeon. Knowing from Bayer that the terrain is rugged, he decides to continue on foot. Xinhua already knew that such outbreaks would occur, as he had experienced them in his previous life. He also knew these incidents represented an excellent opportunity to obtain the Flower of Acceleration, a rare plant he missed in his past life because its hidden dungeon was never revealed, just as Bael had now mentioned. Finally reaching Biel's position, Xinhua immediately asks her about the monsters she described over the phone. However, he doesn't wait for an answer and moves forward, saying he'll figure it out himself. Xinhua was aware that Bael, as a rank C awakened, was struggling against the monsters, particularly since the expected internal boss level was rank A+, explaining her fear and concern about losing control. Smiling to calm her down, Xinhua tells Biel they'll succeed together, and that he has an idea he needs to explain. Biel asks him to clarify his plan and terms. Xinhua responds by outlining the emergency response law for secured dungeons, which states that all loot obtained within the dungeon or from slaying monsters belongs to the individual who collected it, not the state. He emphasizes the need for assurance on this matter. Biel assures him that he can consider it authorized by the Seoul branch, director of the Korean Awakeners Association. Feeling satisfied, Xinhua begins detailing his attack plan, noting it will only take a minute if they understand how to handle the monsters properly. He explains that all the monsters in this dungeon are classified as enhanced beasts, including the enhanced Toker, a creature with immense physical strength that Biel likely encountered during her patrols. When Biel asks him to repeat the monster's name, Xinhua dismisses it as unimportant, instead focusing on their strategy. He explains that these creatures' weak point is their necks, areas not covered by their armor. Xinhua likens them to bodybuilders with large, bulky muscles that limit their ability to reach their necks or backs. Targeting these vulnerable spots is key to landing critical blows. Xinhua assigns Biel the role of attacker, emphasizing that her speed and agility will make her strikes lethal, especially in aiming for the monster's nervous system at their necks. Biel affirms her understanding and agree to execute his plan, though she remains curious about how Xinhua possesses such detailed knowledge. The monsters start breaking through the barrier Biel had created using the rock collapse. Xinhua observes the massive rabbit-like enhanced Toker emerging from the rubble with menacing eyes. He instructs Biel to stay behind him and not move. Feeling irritated by these troublesome monsters, Xinhua acknowledges their danger, knowing any slip-up could cost their lives. He notices Biel's hands trembling uncontrollably, and realizes she's deeply anxious, believing she stands no chance against the monsters if they get to her to reassure her. Xinhua tells her, these creatures aren't as strong as they appear. Pulling out a magical energy orb, Xinhua begins charging it with his mana until it overflows with power. Preparing to throw it at one of the giant, monstrous rabbits, he hurls the supercharged orb at incredible speed. Just as the rabbit approaches them, the rabbit attempts to grab the orb defensively, but is caught off guard as the orb pierces through its arm entirely, leaving it deformed and unable to react. Biel stands stunned at the scene unfolding before her calmly. The orb returns to Xinhua's hand as if under his command. Turning to Biel, Xinhua remarks that there are still plenty of monsters standing and tells her to stop gawking and join him in taking them down. Fired up, Biel agrees, enthusiastically, declaring that they'll eliminate all the monsters together. As Xinhua and Biel charge toward the horde of monstrous rabbits, the creatures surge toward them as well. Xinhua takes the lead, leaping into the air and landing a devastating kick squarely on the face of one of the rabbits. The force of his enhanced leg sends the creature sprawling to the ground instantly. Laughing mockingly, Xinhua taunts the rabbit, calling it incredibly weak. Before the rabbit can recover, Biel appears behind it, swiftly slashing its neck with her razor-sharp dagger. Xinhua gives her an approving smile, filled with pride. As Biel begins to feel excitement coursing through her despite her initial fear. Fueled by adrenaline, she charges headlong at the remaining rabbits, eliminating them mercilessly. Xinhua, now intoxicated by the thrill of battle, mocks the hulking rabbits, exclaiming that their massive muscles are useless as long as their weak points are so exposed. While Biel is engrossed in the fight, one rabbit sneaks up behind her and attempts an attack. Xinhua dashes toward her with incredible speed, delivering a powerful blow to the rabbit's abdomen, buying Biel time to retreat from the immediate danger. Xinhua follows up with a series of rapid and unrelenting strikes, leaving the rabbit no chance to counter. Following their plan, Biel leaps onto the giant rabbit, targeting its exposed neck and swiftly delivering a fatal blow. Xinhua points toward the remaining monsters, reminding her there's no time to rest yet. Biel energized heads for the other rabbits and begins dispatching them with remarkable speed, jokingly likening the battle to preparing rabbit shawarma. Within mere minutes, Biel manages to take down a significant number of creatures, while Xinhua also spares no effort in his attacks. Observing Xinhua's movements, Biel finds herself recalling Li Hanyul, the rank S+ head of the Bizan branch, famed for his close combat prowess and brutal fighting style. However, Xinhua's techniques appear far more fluid, precise and efficient compared to Hanyul's, leading Biel to suspect that Xinhua's combat abilities might surpass even his. Despite Xinhua's gentler demeanor, Xinhua glances at Biel and announces that they've cleared the monstrous rabbits outside, and now it's time to venture into the dungeon. Surprised, Biel questions how they'll manage to enter without reinforcements. Smiling confidently, Xinhua reminds her that he sacrificed his precious vacation time to be here and won't waste any more of it. He adds that entering the dungeon on their own means they'll claim all the loot without needing to share. As they approach the dungeon gate, they continue battling more monstrous rabbits along the way. Biel notices that as long as she fights alongside Xinhua, taking down rank A+ monsters feels surprisingly manageable. She informs him that while the dungeon has entered a state of outbreak, the creatures inside aren't exiting anytime soon, and the valley is more complex than she had anticipated. Biel uses her acute hearing to estimate the number of monsters and their distance. After a moment, she confidently reports that there are approximately 1,000 monsters inside, including the dungeon boss. Xinhua, impressed by her skill, admits he thought they'd need to delve deeper into the dungeon to uncover such information, and didn't expect her to be so adept at reconnaissance. Smiling, Biel replies that spotting and eliminating monsters is her favorite part of the job. As Biel moves to execute the plan, she suddenly winces in pain from her ankle, making it difficult for her to walk without discomfort. Xinhua immediately notices and asks if she's okay. Gritting her teeth, Biel admits she might have overexerted herself, but insists it's not a serious injury. She asks him to scout the area from above. Xinhua channels his magical energy into his legs and leaps high, landing atop a rocky outcrop. Biel marvels at the marks Xinhua's jump left on the rocky ground, wondering about his rapid power progression in such a short time. From his vantage point, Xinhua confirms Bale's estimate that there are indeed over 1,000 monsters within the dungeon, making it nearly impossible for them to handle the situation alone. He asks her how many dimensional stone grenades she has. Bale pulls out all the grenades and shows them to him. Xinhua descends and tells her they must prevent the creatures from approaching the dungeon entrance at all costs. He emphasizes that they'll need to use all their strength to seal the valley and trap the monsters inside. Xinhua carefully begins planting the grenades in the ground. He asks if she has the detonator, to which she replies affirmatively, though she still doesn't fully understand his plan. Xinhua explains that his left arm functions as a conduit for magical energy, which will amplify the explosion significantly. He instructs her to retreat to a safe distance from the blast zone. Xinhua began channeling his magical energy into the stone bombs. Within moments, the cracks in the rocks filled with energy, triggering an immense and majestic explosion that caused the rocky masses to collapse. Smiling confidently, Xinhua announced that the task was successful, sealing both the exit and entrance to the dungeon. Now, all they had to do was move forward on their remaining path. Xinhua took out a power-boosting potion and handed it to Bale, insisting that she should drink it first. Bale accepted the potion and curiously asked him what it was. Xinhua explained that it was a strengthening potion capable of increasing her power by 1.5 to 2.5 times for 30 minutes. Stunned by his words, Bale reminded him that performance enhancers are strictly prohibited and possessing them was punishable under the Awakener's law. Xinhua dismissed her concerns, urging her to think of it as a new experience, adding that she would be the third person in Korea to try the potion. He clarified that he had specifically designed the potion to be free of any side effects. Surprised, Bale asked how he managed to eliminate the side effects and whether he had conducted clinical trials before using it. Xinhua replied that the Korean Awakeners Association did not permit clinical trials, but assured her that the potion was neither addictive nor harmful and could nearly double a user's combat capability. Bale questioned if the potion resembled the mysterious Chinese drug. Irritated by the comparison, Xinhua told her not to equate his precious creation with that cheap concoction. Tossing the potion toward her, he remarked that if she didn't drink it now, she could save it for when she truly needed it. As they proceeded, Xinhua and Bale encountered a class of monster known as the Enhanced Azura. Unlike the massive Tucker beasts that relied on brute strength, Azura was a magical creature, typically appearing in groups, making its magical attacks extremely potent, violent, and difficult to evade. Understanding the urgency to eliminate it swiftly, Xinhua activated his enhancement ability to amplify his cognitive processing, allowing him to predict attacks and determine optimal combat strategies. He also utilized the Flower of Supremacy, which improved his mental performance by 10%. Soon, Azura launched an incredibly rapid attack, but Xinhua managed to track its movements and predict its trajectory. Despite their intensity, the attacks followed linear paths, making them relatively easy to dodge. Observing Xinhua charging directly toward the monsters, Duel shouted in alarm, warning him of the danger. Xinhua responded loudly, reminding her that they needed to take responsibility. Realizing the stakes, Bale resolved to help contain the crisis, especially since failing would endanger the nearby residents. Though she couldn't perceive the attacks as clearly as Xinhua, she steeled herself for action. Xinhua channeled a massive amount of energy into the magical orb he held, then hurled it fiercely at the Azura monsters. Bale was astonished to see the attack pierce through the monsters' defenses and land a direct hit, even without any specialized equipment. Motivated, she joined the fight, finding the creatures less formidable than she had imagined. The monsters noticed Bale's assault and retaliated fiercely, but Xinhua remained vigilant, striking relentlessly and denying them any chance to counterattack. Xinhua employed all his combat techniques, but Bale noticed his fighting style had become more intense and forceful than before. Unsure of the reason behind this sudden surge in power, she fought even harder alongside him. Gradually, Bale began to believe that together, they could stop the dungeon outbreak if they maintained this pace. Xinhua, exhilarated, shouted mockingly, "With so many of you here, how are you still failing to catch me at this rate? I'll add single-handedly stopping a dungeon outbreak to my resume." Meanwhile, reinforcement teams arrived at the ravine only to find an unusual scene. There were no monsters outside. They noticed a lack of footprints, lingering energy, or portal interactions, indicating that the monsters hadn't left the dungeon. The team leader, Song Seon-rim, and a class awakener and head of the Korean Awakeners Association branch in Jeju Island, asked for the readings from their measuring devices. The measurement team reported that the indicators confirmed they were in the 4th phase of the outbreak. Confused, Seong pointed out that a phase for outbreak should have already released hundreds of monsters, and a C-class awakener like Bile couldn't possibly handle the situation alone. He also noted that the dungeon boss would be at least class A, making the scenario critically dangerous, especially if Bile were trapped inside. Commander Song decided to prepare for a raid to rescue Bile and her team, if they were still alive. As the team approached the dungeon entrance, they were stunned to find the massive torn bodies of numerous Tucker monsters sprawled before it. The commander assumed the destruction was caused by dimensional bombs triggering a rock slide. However, upon closer inspection, he noticed the way the monsters had been killed resembled Biral's combat style. Given the sheer number of bodies, the commander concluded that reinforcements must have arrived before them, securing a bloodless victory. Inside the dungeon, Xinhua and Bile pressed forward. Xinhua asked Bile for her opinion on the situation and whether it had been as challenging as she had expected. Smiling enthusiastically, Bile admitted she had never imagined they could accomplish so much on their own. Xinhua replied that the monsters had been moving chaotically, making it easier to pick them off one by one. Bile explained that she hadn't expended much of her magical energy, she usually just finished the job. However, she asked how Xinhua managed to fight like that, wondering if he used magic to generate infinite energy. She added that if the secret lay in the potion he carried, she might try it now. Xinhua told Bile that most of his energy regenerated after brief rests, and that his body grew stronger to the point where even his rank had risen. Mentioning ranks reminded him that he hadn't checked his current level in a while. Opening his system interface, he discovered that his rank had reached C-. He was astonished as advancing through these stages to reach rank C usually took at least 4 years, marking a significant achievement in record time. Turning to Bile, Xinhua thanked her for her clever idea of blocking the ravine to slow the monster's movement. He pointed to tracks on the ground, indicating the intense activity in the area before they arrived. Bile responded that the monsters still inside the dungeon might not know how to leave, or they might simply prefer staying in what they considered their home base. Xinhua noted that in some cases, monsters chose to remain in their dungeons, while in others, creatures from distant continents would arrive. He knew this information would seem strange to Bile, as modern awakeners weren't aware that their country would one day connect with the continents of Nazo and Muge. Suddenly, Bile sensed an intense and an unusual pressure far beyond anything they had encountered so far. Xinhua anticipated the arrival of this creature, the leader of the monsters roaming the area, and felt its overwhelming magical energy. He also knew that the acceleration flower could only be obtained by defeating this particular being. Xinhua moved cautiously toward the monster to secure a strategic position, instructing Bile to stay back and avoid intervening in the fight, instead keeping watch for other monsters. He reiterated that she shouldn't interfere, no matter how difficult things appear, assuring her that he knew exactly what he was doing. Though hesitant, Bile agreed, due to his evident determination. As Xinhua advanced toward the monster, he remained highly alert, knowing a single mistake could cost him his life. Despite his confidence in understanding the creature's nature, he felt a slight unease. The monster accelerator turned its gaze toward Xinhua and began to approach. In a deep voice, it remarked that it had finally found the right place, and that Xinhua's human scent reminded it of the continent of Nassau. Xinhua could understand the monster's language, a dialect from Nassau. He found it strange and wondered whether the creature's presence here was natural, or if something unexpected had occurred. Without warning, the battle between Xinhua and Accelerator began. Xinhua quickly noted the creature's incredible speed, just as he had anticipated. In addition to its extreme agility, it possessed deadly offensive power and devastating strikes, along with a long tail it used to attack alongside its limbs. Xinhua understood that creatures with excellent mobility, like Accelerator, consumed energy explosively, making the damage they sustained in a short period more critical than usual. Additionally, he knew that monsters with evenly distributed stats could endure attacks more effectively, but Accelerator's over-reliance on speed and instantaneous offensive power exposed its weaknesses. Xinhua attempted a fatal strike against Accelerator, but the monster evaded effortlessly, mocking him for attacking like a rodent. Accelerator retaliated with a swift tail attack, but Xinhua dodged just in time. Xinhua took a booster potion and noticed his reflexes improving significantly, though Accelerator's tail still lagged slightly, unbalancing. Realizing that prolonging the fight would inevitably lead to his loss, Xinhua concluded that he needed to end it within 5 minutes to shift the odds in his favor. Channeling a substantial amount of energy into his magical orb, Xinhua hurled it at Accelerator. The monster easily dodged the attack and mocked Xinhua, calling it child's play. However, Accelerator's ridicule was cut short when a sudden direct hit landed squarely on its face. Xinhua charged at the monster with incredible speed, determined not to give it a chance to counter. However, Accelerator, being an SS-class monster, quickly regained its balance and retaliated with a tail strike that was nearly impossible to dodge. Bile froze in terror, realizing the blow would be fatal if it connected with Xinhua. To her surprise, the attack missed as Xinhua clung to Accelerator's tail, even as the monster destroyed the surrounding rocks with its powerful swings. Xinhua smirked and sarcastically remarked that he might consider having the monster's tail for dinner that night. Meanwhile, Commander Song's team continued searching for Buell. They noticed that every path they passed was littered with the bodies of monsters, with tracks suggesting only 2 individuals had been present. They wondered how such a small team could advance so quickly and suppress all the monsters, concluding that Buell's companion had to be an S+ ranked awakener at the very least. Commander Song felt both frustrated and amazed, noting that even with precise knowledge of the monster's weaknesses, the dungeon's layout and nature were still largely unknown. Suddenly, a massive explosion reverberated from the dungeon's entrance. Shocked, the commander urged his team to hurry, stating that such a large blast indicated a fierce battle was underway and that Bile and her companion were still alive. The team rushed forward with all their strength to salvage the situation. Inside the dungeon, Xinhua was still fully engrossed in his battle with Accelerator, channeling the maximum power into his arms. Xinhua pressed on as Accelerator, now enraged, taunted him, claiming his weak attacks would never penetrate its durable skin. Ignoring the taunts, Xinhua unleashed a relentless barrage of punches, finally breaking through a portion of the monster's tough exterior. Staggered, Accelerator fell to the ground, exclaiming disbelief over what had just happened in this absurd world. Turning to Xinhua, it declared that fools like him didn't realize this wasn't the end, and that the great Lichero will ensure its immortality. Xinhua scoffed and asked about this Lichero, fully aware that Lichero was the mastermind behind the chaos that followed the connection between Nazo and Earth in 2025. Accelerator continued its rant, proclaiming that it would live in eternal light while Xinhua faced endless torment. Losing patience, Xinhua interrupted with a powerful punch, demanding that the monster stop its nonsense. With Accelerator defeated, the rare acceleration flower appeared, granting a new skill, speed enhancement. Xinhua immediately consumed the flower, knowing it would grant him the ability to accelerate his movements and reactions proportional to the amount of magical energy used. However, Xinhua understood the risks. Overuse of the ability could cause serious injuries due to the strain it put on the body. Despite this, he felt a surge of pride and triumph. Standing under a rocky overhang, he noticed a large boulder beginning to crack and fall. For an ordinary person, the falling rock would have been fatal, but with his newly acquired skill, Xinhua dodged the boulder and shattered at mid-air. Quickly moving away from the collapse, Xinhua felt a wave of fatigue, realizing it was a side effect of the acceleration ability, which increased the strain on his muscles and bones. He brushed it off, telling himself it was a minor issue, since he planned to modify his bones soon. Anyway, calling out to Beale, Xinhua announced that they had successfully defeated the main monster, and asked her to check the dungeon's internal metrics. He froze in shock when he turned to find that she was not beside him. Looking around, he spotted her collapsed on the ground covered in blood. In a faint voice, she apologized, explaining that she hadn't realized her injuries were so severe. She reassured him, though, that the dungeon's threat level had returned to its normal phase. Biel asked if he had managed to defeat the dungeon boss. Xinhua nodded and told her it was all taken care of, so there was no need to worry. Smiling weakly, Biel joked, saying she wasn't sure who the real monster was, him or the dungeon creatures. She coughed painfully before losing consciousness entirely. Xinhua immediately picked her up and rushed to exit the dungeon at full speed, blaming himself for not recognizing from the start that the dungeon's conditions were too harsh for Buell to handle alone. He resolved to consider all possible variables in the future and chastise the Jeju branch for their negligence and incompetence in managing the crisis. Like a lightning bolt, Xinhua dashed out of the dungeon, leaving the reinforcement team stunned as they saw him flash past. They called out, asking him to stop for a moment. Turning back, Xinhua inquired if they were the Jeju Island reinforcements. Commander Song confirmed this, only for Xinhua to reply disdainfully, then clean up the mess inside. Instead of standing around uselessly, enhancing his speed further, Xinhua sped off to save Beale's life, unconcerned by the team's astonished remarks.